across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good evening. This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell, and it's been a dramatic day in UK politics because the Defence Secretary, John Healey, has resigned. A damning letter to the Prime Minister talking about the defence financial settlement. Listen to this. What it does, in John Healey's opinion, the Defence Secretary has just resigned. It falls well short of what is required for defence and the country at this dangerous time. You've been unable, and the Treasury has been unwilling to commit the resources that the nation needs to defend the country at this time of rising threats. Absolutely excoriating of the Prime Minister. We're keeping an eye on Belfast as well, what's happening there. Could there be a third night of violence? And we'll talk about the Healey fallout in a number of different angles. We've got a former Defence Secretary on the programme, we've got a Labour MP on the programme who has been critical of Starmer, we've got a former head of the Army on the programme. This is the place you need to be tonight on Thursday to find out exactly what is happening. Also, Wegovy has got a pill rather than an injection. A pill will now be available for that dramatic weight loss that so many people want to have. Is it safe? Is that a desirable thing? We'll talk about that, and we'll also talk about the fact that the NHS treats hundreds of patients a day in cupboards and in car parks on some occasions. Absolutely disgraceful. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. I want to make sure that you get your voice on the air. Whatever it is you want to say. Maybe you're from a military family. Maybe you're a veteran. Maybe you're worried about what is going on and the levels of defence funding or lack of them. 0344 499 1000. Can we protect the country? Text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a WhatsApp text message. Send me a WhatsApp voice message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Stay with us here on the Evening Exchange on Talk. Well, it was around lunchtime that the Defence Secretary resigned. The leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, has reacted. This is what she said.
Not surprised. John Healey has done the honourable thing. Yesterday, I raised the issue of the Defence Investment Plan, and the Prime Minister exposed the fact that he was not going to put money into defence to the amount that was required. And I'm sure John Healey sat there listening to the Prime Minister tell me that he was increasing defence funding when he is not. He has done the honourable thing and resigned. I am glad that he agrees with me that we need to put more money into defence, but what is shocking is what he's written in his letter, where he says that the Prime Minister is making the country less safe and putting our troops at risk at a time of increasing threats.
A former Defence Secretary, a former Labour Defence Secretary, John Hutton, has said this to our stablemates in Times Radio.
It's a car crash, isn't it, really? I think in political terms, I don't think you could exaggerate the mess that we've found ourselves in. And I think for John's successor, it's a really difficult choice that he or she is going to face, because if the numbers remain the same, if it's 13.5 billion, netted off the 3.5 billion that the Treasury want to account for in efficiency gains, it's not a sufficiently adequate amount of money to do both things that need to be done, which is to point us in the direction of the SDR and its new capabilities that it says we needed, and also to get us on a pathway to 3.5% of GDP on defence. And that dilemma is going to face the John Healey's successor, and he or she is going to face a hell of a hurdle to get over on this.
The former Defence Secretary there, Lord Hutton, John Hutton, speaking to us. We'll speak to Sir Gavin Williamson, the former Defence Secretary, later. We'll speak to the former head of the Army in a minute or two. I want to speak to the senior backbencher now, Graham Stringer, who has been a critic of Keir Starmer. Another dramatic day in the Cabinet and for British politics. He's lost his Health Secretary and his Defence Secretary within the last couple of weeks. Graham, your reaction?
Well, in a sense, like Kemi Badenoch, I'm not surprised. But the important thing about this statement, nobody who wants to be the next Defence Secretary can do it unless they get a better settlement. The next Prime Minister, who should be with us over the next few months, cannot become Prime Minister in a credible way unless they instruct the Treasury to increase the amount of money for defence. It is an extraordinary situation where a Defence Secretary tells the Prime Minister, our troops will not be safe, the country is not being safe if we don't get extra money, and the extra money doesn't appear. Seems to me that the wrong person has resigned, the person who is responsible for leaving the country without adequate defences and our troops without adequate protection is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, not the Defence Secretary. He is, Kemi Badenoch said, is an honourable man.
So you think Rachel Reeves should go?
Well, it's sort of too late for that, but if that was the choice before the Prime Minister, that to get funding for the defence, the Chancellor of the Exchequer was being stubborn and not doing it, well, it shouldn't have been the Defence Secretary who was looking after our interests, making sure, or trying to make sure the country was adequately defended. It shouldn't have been him that was gone. It should have been the Chancellor of the Exchequer. After all, the Prime Minister's title on the door of 10 Downing Street is First Lord to the Treasury. He should just have instructed her and got a new Chancellor who would allow the funds to be available that would give adequate defence to this country.
Where should the funds come from? Because the government has tried in the last little while to top slice, to take 1% off most budgets, including the NHS actually, and to take more money from net zero and from other budgets as well. I just wonder if if you're in as precarious a position as Keir Starmer is, can you really go around saying to Ed Miliband, for example, we're taking a load of your budget? Can you say to Heidi Alexander, we're taking some of your money from transport? Has he got the political strength to do that, actually, even if he did want to give all this money to defence, which I think we agree should be put into it because it's been underfunded for such a long time?
From day one of this government, the Prime Minister has not tried to rejig the budget of the whole country so that we have adequate defence. The first whiff of grape shot when some backbenchers said they didn't like the proposals for changing the benefit system. He gave up. There is this legend grown up that somehow backbenchers voted down changes to the benefits budget. It isn't true. It was never put before the Commons. He just backed down. My view, then and now, was that he would have got that through the Commons and he would have strengthened his position because he would have been saying, I'm in charge, and if backbenchers want to take me on, I will win. But now he can't take ministers on, he can't take backbenchers on. If I can tell you an anecdote, the first difficulty Tony Blair had in '97 over single-parent benefits, I think it was, when he was walking into the chamber, he was telling any backbencher who listened to him, because there was a rebellion on, he said, I am not going to get into a position where, like John Major, who just was a previous Prime Minister, and being all the time a hostage to a small number of backbenchers. Keir Starmer has done exactly what John Major did. He's made himself a hostage to anybody who shouts down his ear.
Keir Starmer says, I will always do what is needed to keep our country safe. He's insisted the key defence funding plan will provide the resources our military needs to keep us safe, in his reply to John Healey. Is that just wrong? Is that just factually wrong, in your opinion?
As far as I understand the defence budget, and I've looked at it in a bit of detail, not as much detail as I'm sure the defence ministers have, I trust the judgment of John Healey and John Hutton, who's just been on as a former Defence Secretary, and nearly all the defence experts who are writing in our press, that we are not adequately defended. You look at the number of drones we don't have. We've got a tiny number of drones. We haven't changed our defence structure properly as war has changed. We're at war with the dictatorships in the East already in cyberspace. We're spending a lot of money on that. We need to be spending money on the physical defence as well as on computers.
Yeah, and that is all fascinating, Graham. Where does this leave the Prime Minister? Because, I mean, he's got to appoint another Defence Secretary. He hasn't done that so far. He's running out of allies, isn't he?
I don't know how many allies he's got. He's threatening junior ministers that if they don't support him, he'll sack them. It's so reminiscent of Boris Johnson's last days.
Is that where we are right now, do you think, Graham?
We're not quite as bad as Boris Johnson. He's not lost as many ministers, but we're getting that way. Will he really, if somebody stands up and say, I'm going to support West Streeting or Andy Burnham or somebody else, is he really going to sack them? He will quickly run out of ministers if he does that. Yeah. He has... as I said, from day one, he's been a very weak Prime Minister. He will go, I've no doubt about that. How I try to see this debate positively, is that it will mean that any incoming Prime Minister, whoever they are, will have to take seriously restructuring the budget. We can't go on with the shape of the budget we've got, spending as much money as we do on benefits, not investing in defence, not investing in infrastructure, and not improving the efficiency of the NHS.
Graham, thank you for that. Graham Stringer there, who is a Labour MP for Blakely and Middleton, and thank you for your thoughts on that. Let's go to Colonel Richard Kemp, former head of the British Army, senior officer, of course, in the Army previously. Richard, thank you for joining us this evening. We have this bizarre situation where, or maybe it's a perfectly understandable situation, I wonder what you think about it, when you have the outgoing Defence Secretary saying to the Prime Minister in terms and publicly, you've been unable and the Treasury has been unwilling to commit the resources that the nation needs to defend the country at this time of rising threats. Your DIP financial settlement, which I was first given in full on Monday afternoon this week, falls well short of what is required for defence and the country at this dangerous time. Your reaction, Richard?
Well, the first thing I'd say is I think we have to admire John Healey for having the moral courage to stand up and resign when he very clearly is faced with a situation in which the Labour government, the Treasury and the Prime Minister does not take defence seriously. Despite all Keir Starmer's fine words about how important it is and how we're going to meet President Trump's demands for the percentage of GDP spent on defence, clearly that's not realistic. He never intended to do that. He was really trying to mollify President Trump, I think, that rather than an actual intention. And the reality is that John Healey said, I think, in his resignation statement that the intelligence assessment is that there will be a possibility of a conflict with the Russians by 2030, and he doesn't believe we'll be ready for that by then on current expenditure planning. The reality, of course, is that we should be ready now. We don't know whether it's 4 years' time before we get attacked by somebody or whether it's going to be 10 years' time. It might be tomorrow. And therefore, our defence should be ready to defend this country. And it clearly isn't, as John Healey has rightly pointed out. And this is not just down to the current government. It is their current responsibility. But successive governments, Conservative and Labour, have miserably failed to take defence seriously. It doesn't win them enough votes, and therefore they don't give enough money to it.
And interestingly, Sir Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary, in the Telegraph this evening, saying, I warned John Healey about the state of Britain's defences for 2 years. He did nothing. You say that you admire John Healey for resigning. Should he have done so before now? Should he have raised the alarm before now? Do you think so? Or perhaps he just went as far as he could and tried to battle internally in order to attempt to get some rise in the defence spending that would keep us safe. That hasn't happened, and now he's in the position he's in.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what his thought processes were, but the previous Defence Secretary you mentioned there, what was he doing? Labour definitely inherited defence in a very bad way, but have done nothing to improve it. But it's all very well for one government to criticise its successors. But the reality is that they've all behaved in a disgraceful way as far as defence is concerned. I do think there's also, I don't really know the details, but I do think there's potential manoeuvring here within the Labour government. And it may be that it was either money be taken away from climate change, that the massive amount of money that's been spent to get to so-called net zero, or money taken away or not given to defence. And it may be that the two ministers, Miliband and Healy, arguing about it. Miliband won and Healy lost, and maybe it was considered by Keir Starmer that Miliband would be that Healy's departure would be the least damaging to the government overall.
There is some relief tonight, I'm sure, worldwide, that Donald Trump has said he has cancelled strikes against Iran after earlier threatening very hard attacks tonight. We're not involved with that militarily to the extent that some would like us to be. I just wonder, when you see that, and perhaps you give me your reaction to that news, and similarly the kind of threats that we have in this country from Iran, from China, Russia, from other nations that would do us harm, what needs to happen, do you think?
Yeah, well, one thing I think people should not necessarily do is to take everything President Trump says literally. And the fact he's saying we're not going to attack tonight doesn't mean we're not going to attack tonight, if you understand what I mean.
I do.
It's a fairly classic form of deception, which is necessary in conflict. So we'll wait and see what happens. But I do believe that that we need to return to this. When I say we, I'm talking about the United States and Israel primarily, return to this conflict and do a great deal more damage to Iran, particularly to its economic infrastructure, than has happened now, because so far the authorities in Tehran have been stringing the United States along for a very long time. And even if a deal is signed, and I know President Trump is not a fool, and I know he's only too wise to Iran's tricks, but even if a deal is signed at the highest levels, as he suggested, that doesn't really mean anything. The Iranian regime does not adhere to their undertakings. They're more than happy to sign something and then do something completely different. So I think the only way really to nail this regime and to really disable it is continued military action, terrible though that is for many people, including the people in Iraq, some of the people in Iran, and also, of course, in the countries against which Iran will retaliate, whether it be Israel or the Gulf states.
And we hear so little about regime change these days as well. When do you think the rot started when it came to defence spending? I was speaking to a former Labour advisor recently who worked under Gordon Brown. He said Gordon Brown, as Chancellor, would generally give the money for things that they needed to give money to. You may disagree with this, Afghanistan and Iraq, for example, but when it came to maintenance, when it came to the running costs, essentially, of the military, that money just wasn't there. Does it go back that far? Is what's happened with John Healey today simply a sort of logical conclusion of that to some degree?
I think it goes back further. I think it goes back to John Major's time, when there was the fall of the Soviet Union, and there was, or even before John Major's that occurred. But he really, I think, did everything he could to reap the peace dividend, so-called, by beginning the gradual rundown of our defences. And every government since then has continued to run our defences down in a very irresponsible way. And up until let's say up until the invasion of Ukraine 4 years ago, they thought they'd probably gambled right. But of course you can't run defences down for decades and then suddenly bring them up to strength again and create the capabilities that you really need, particularly in the modern world, where you need not only very, very powerful military hardware like tanks, artillery, aircraft, warships, but you also need some of the more recent technological developments like AI, like drones, like unmanned ground vehicles, unmanned sea vehicles, etc. So if, in effect, as technology's developed, it hasn't kind of wiped out the previous requirements, it's just added to them. So defence has become more and more expensive, and Britain, and the British Army, should say, alone, has been run down repeatedly since Russia invaded Ukraine. At the very time when everyone's talking about, including the current Prime Minister, talking about, this is a wake-up call, etc. But what do they do about it? They just continue to run the British forces down. It's grossly irresponsible. I know they've got very tough spending decisions to take. I'm well aware of that. The thing is that I think many of them look at it as in terms of more, rather than the country's interests, their own electoral interests. And, as I kind of mentioned, defence does not win votes in Britain.
Who should be the new Defence Secretary? Would Al Carnes be a good person? He's the Armed Forces Minister.
I don't know. I don't really mind who is, because I don't think whoever is in that position will make any difference. I think, the Treasury has got its plans, the Prime Minister's endorsed them. Whoever takes over that role is really taking over a poisoned chalice. And I don't think that whoever sits there is going to somehow persuade Starmer to increase defence spending. And the same will go, let's say Burnham wins a Labour leadership election. I don't think we're going to see any difference there either. So I'm not optimistic about, shall we say, the outcome of John Healey's resignation.
Just a final question. You served very bravely in combatant forces in Northern Ireland. I just wonder whether you could give me your thoughts on what has happened there over the past few nights and how the authorities are dealing with it, and the causes as well from your perspective.
I was actually in Northern Ireland for a long time, longer than anywhere else. I was there, did about 7 tours in Northern Ireland.
Goodness me.
During the Troubles. I've not recovered yet. But yeah, I mean, I think it's, in a way, it was predictable. Some of these horrors that as we saw on the streets of Belfast recently of an attempted beheading, we've seen elsewhere in the UK repeatedly over the years. Let's not forget Lee Rigby, the serving Fusilier soldier who was also hacked up by jihadists, and they attempted to behead him as well. I think the difference is that Northern Ireland, the people in Northern Ireland have much less patience and tolerance. And given their, the paramilitary organizations in many respects still exist over there in one form or another, and they have the ability to lash out in the way we've seen in the last 2 nights with, really unforgivable violence. They do have that ability, and I think in mainland Britain, people have been far more, I'd say, tolerant of these things. But I do fear that the contagion from Northern Ireland could spread into the mainland, and we could see, perhaps the next time there's an outrage by one of these people, an immigrant or whatever, we do see a similar reaction in the mainland, having seen what happened on the streets of Belfast.
Richard, I know you know this, but I'm just going to say it anyway. The actions of you and your men in Northern Ireland allowed my generation to grow up in peace. The peace process wouldn't have happened without the contribution of the UK Army, and I want to thank you and those who served under you for that. That is Colonel Richard Kemp, retired British Army officer. Thank you for joining us this evening, giving us your analysis there. Margaret in Birmingham says, Graham Stringer is a truthful, honest MP. Why is he not a minister? Not sure. Did Lord Robertson bring up defence a few weeks ago? He did, indeed. Starmer ignored that advice, says Margaret. Very good message, Margaret. Thank you. Lies and letdowns from Starmer. Time for him to go. General election now. Mark in Old Harlow says, love your show and always listen. Thank you, Mark. This Labour Prime Minister should be tried for treason. Something is going on. They're ruining this country in plain sight, in Mark's view. Haley in Wiltshire says, I was furious with Keir Starmer. My daughter and son are in the army and had to give their webbing, body armour, etc. to Ukraine, and they have to buy their own kit, for example, boots, due to poor quality and lack of supply. The government needs to get into the real world, says Haley. Lots to discuss on all of this. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We'll go to the debate desk in a second. Former number 10 advisor Tom Skinner will be there, as will Ebs Akintade. Stay with us here on Talk.
think the trigger for this is people.
You think they just did it for no reason whatsoever? You think they rioted last night for no reason?
They took to the streets last night because they were thugs who wanted to engage in violence.
What about the peaceful protesters? There were peaceful protesters all over Northern Ireland as well.
They have a right, as they always should, to protest, but there is always going to be a difference of opinion when it does come to whether it's a legal migrant or an illegal migrant, whether it's a person who has come here to seek refuge or whether it's someone who's come here to work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Mike and Lincoln, who says, "Evening, Peter. Surely if Starmer is going to face down his backbenchers and ministers, then he has to make it plain that if they don't do as they're told, he'll visit the King, dissolve Parliament and call a general election. Ever so many of them would be out of a job if an election were to be called, and that would focus minds on getting Starmer's legislation through without too much trouble." Maybe it would, Mike, but I'm not sure Keir Starmer would be Prime Minister by the end of it. On defence, we have none, says this texter. If another country wants to launch missiles at us, I quote former Defence Secretary Healy, "We see you, but in reality there is nothing we can do about incoming threats as we have no air defence. Sleep soundly in your beds tonight, the British public." Thank you to Mary in County Down, who's talked about what has been happening in Northern Ireland. We're keeping an eye on that. We're talking about it later on this evening to see what has happened. And Mary in County Down says it's perfectly possible for Border Force to do far more stringent checks on immigrants passing through the common travel area, or we can just sit back, screech about racism and wait for more blood to run in the streets. Jason in the Lake District on the John Healey resignation, he says the letter is very damaging. Isn't it a wonderful sight watching them fall apart? Oh, all the grown-ups with the most prepared party for government in history, every department fully costed. Yeah, I remember all that. Elisa says thank you to Colonel Richard Kemp. The US and Israel cannot stop now. The Iranian regime has to be squashed or there will never be peace for any of us. As for Ben Wallace, I lost any respect I had for him when he was unjustifiably critical of Israel at the start of the defensive war against Hamas. What exactly did he achieve? The Tories and Labour have let us down and put our security at risk, says Elisa. Let's go to the debate desk. Ebs Al-Kantari, political commentator, is with us. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
And Tom Skinner, former Number 10 advisor. Hello, sir.
Good evening.
Tell us what you think, first of all, Tom, about John Healey's resignation. I mean, pretty damning here. You have been unable, Prime Minister, and the Treasury has been unwilling to commit the resources the nation needs to defend the country at this time of rising threats. I mean, you can't get much more straightforward than that, can you?
No, it's absolutely devastating. And last time I was here, Peter, it was the evening that Wed Streeting resigned, and we were talking about how damaging that was for Keir Starmer. But I think
maybe we should keep booking you
every time I come on.
No, maybe the act of booking you means that
it's the tipping point.
That means a minister resigns. So yeah.
And we were discussing that night what that actually meant for Starmer, and I think we both agree that it could be dismissed as the ambition of a sort of
leadership
contender, whereas this one is, I think, really, really cutting.
You think it's out of principle?
I think John Healey's made a very principled decision. I think he's made a decision in the national interest. I think he wants to do the right thing to put the Prime Minister under pressure to make a decision. The criticism of Starmer since he was elected really is he talks really big, talks of smashing gangs, and he makes big spending commitments and talks really big when he's welcoming Zelensky to Number 10 or in the White House with Donald Trump, but doesn't really follow through, doesn't ever follow through on that when it comes to making big decisions and difficult choices. And this was going to be one of them. He needed to bite the bullet, make big decisions on energy. He's clearly lost the fight with Ed Miliband at the Energy Department. Can't make cuts there. So he's had to say to John Healey, sorry, we're just not going to defend the country. And understandably, John Healey said, no, enough's enough, I'm off.
Ebs, what do you make of what's happened today?
It's a sinking ship, and you know they are running before that ship sinks. It's quite clear now. After a few weeks of kind of settlement within the Labour Party, this is just another big hitter who's just decided, I don't like the way this is going. This department doesn't have enough money to keep the country safe. That's what he's basically said. And if he's saying that, I tend to believe him. If he doesn't have faith in his own department's budget, then I have to believe what he's saying. And if he's nervous about it and doesn't want to put his name to it and is resigned as a result, then that is the right thing to do for him. And also it indicates a lot of cracks that are going on in the Labour Party.
The Prime Minister, though, has said that he will always defend the country. Everything is fine, nothing to see here.
Yes.
Sir Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary, has told The Telegraph, I warned John Healey about the state of Britain's defences. For 2 years he did nothing. And a defence source has told The Telegraph the entire situation around the DIP, this is the Defence Investment Programme, is a... It rhymes with hit show, shall we say. My biggest worry now is that Starmer appoints a yes man to be Defence Secretary who just waves through the current settlement. What do you think of that?
But you know that nothing to see here vein. When I was on last week, we were saying that involved in the whole immigration and two-tier policing. So that idea of just ignoring the situation and thinking it's going to go away doesn't work, and I think Keir is guilty of that on many fronts. And up until this point, this is another example.
Is that a sort of general strategy? Just let's hope it goes away.
Let's hope it goes away. Yes.
You can see that from the letter he wrote back to John Healey this evening. It was, thank you very much for your service, John. We agree on all these things. It's really important, and I'm going to continue. Basically, I'm going to continue on. Thanks for the warning, but nothing's going to change here. So I think to be honest, it doesn't matter who he appoints.
Well, that's what Richard Kemp said, actually, Colonel Richard Kemp. He said, because I mentioned and said, what about Al Carnes, for example, the Armed Forces Minister, who he's only been a politician for a very short period of time, but he certainly was a very decorated senior army officer who could have gone probably to the head of the army, actually, if he'd stayed there, but he decided to go into politics.
So he's clearly got screw loose.
Does it matter about who the Defence Secretary is? Because Colonel Kemp says it isn't, and says this isn't about John Healey. This is about a wide sweep that dates back to perhaps even the end of the Cold War, about, in his view, defence being underfunded.
Defence has been underfunded for far too long. It's because the decisions have to be taken over such a long period of time. The investments need to be made early, and the results aren't seen within the lifetime of a parliament. So, understandably, from a pure political point of view, you can see why politicians would delay those decisions or cut it back. There's not that many votes to be lost if 10 years ago someone reduces the spending on a battleship. No one's going to vote particularly on that issue. So you can see why it happens. It's the wrong thing to do, and you need strong politicians to make these decisions that aren't necessarily the most politically easy things to do. But why I think it doesn't matter who the Defence Secretary is because these sorts of big cross-departmental decisions to reduce spending from the welfare budget, to reduce spending from the energy department, are not something the Defence Secretary can do. It needs a very strong number 10 to drive those changes through.
Well, Graham Stringer, the Labour MP, is pretty critical of Keir Starmer, says he thinks Rachel Reeves should be the one resigning over this. What do you think of that, Ebbs?
Oh, well, Rachel from accounts isn't going to go anywhere. She is digging her heels in whatever goes on. There could be
probably in her last political job. Well,
probably.
Realistically.
Her face is so tied to the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, exactly. If he goes, she goes.
When he goes,
she ain't going to go anywhere before him.
No.
So she is... So in as much as there's nothing to see here, everything is fine, she's probably doing that in a much quieter way than Keir, because she's, I think, in the eyes of the public, and maybe she feels she's more indirectly involved in defence spending, so she can stay there and stay quiet, which is quite good at, probably better than the actual job itself.
Tell me what you think, Ebbs, about what Leslie and Hartley has messaged through. I've heard people all day saying health and education are more important than defence. Certainly that's what Jeremy Corbyn has said, but as usual, we shouldn't listen to him. But neither of those things are much use unless we can defend our country, says Leslie. I am in despair.
She's in despair. I don't think there's any reason to be in despair as yet. I think there's lots of things to be in despair about currently, and defence spending probably isn't in the top 5 things to worry about, but it is still important. Obviously it's important, because in these strange, austere times when people are... we need to defend ourselves in case anything does go wrong against a tyrant, we do need to know that we've got the right level of spending in place for defence.
Well, Cliff in Berkshire has said it's been suggested Putin could use missiles to destroy the British factories which make the drones Starmer gave Ukraine. If Russia did attack the British factories, one of which is in Bristol, would we be capable of retaliating? I mean, surely defence of the realm is the #1 thing that any government should be focused on.
Yeah, of course, but I just think they're pulled in so many different directions at the moment. There's so many other bigger crises going on that defence is in there, but I don't think it's deemed by the public as
I think defence is one of those things that you don't know you're under-resourced until you are, and then it's too late. So you need to make these decisions a long time in advance. But these decisions they're trying to make now, that John Healey's fighting for, are not actually for our defence tomorrow. They're for our defence in 5, 10, 15 years. These are things that are going to go generationally. So I think he's actually standing up for future generations of people here by taking a stand.
I find Jeremy Corbyn's tweet. He says, we do not need to spend more money on bombs and bullets. We need to spend more on housing, schools and our NHS instead. A roof over your head, enough food to feed your children, a public health service you can rely on in your time of need. That's what real security means. Tom?
All fine until you're blown up, I think.
Good point. Let's go to a break and we'll talk more about this and lots of other stories around today. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Alan's been in touch and says, evening Peter, evening Alan. If Starmer had any sense, he would have used this to cut the welfare bill and get it through Parliament, as every backbencher would have to agree defence is more important than soft welfare. Joe says, from Shrewsbury, hi Joe, are there any figures for how much money we could direct towards defence if we stopped our National Health Service being used as an international health service? I bet it's millions. I think it's probably billions, Joe, to be brutally honest. Joanna in Salisbury, hi Cardi P, hi Joanna. Did I dream that Starmer said his priority was to keep this nation and its people safe? Starmer lied yesterday at Prime Minister's questions when Kemi said he was cutting the budget by $3 billion. Then he lied and said he wasn't. He'd taken on 1,400 new contracts. He's actually been cutting contracts for the last 2 years. Healy resigning was proof. Rats leaving a sinking ship. That's basically what Ebbs was saying there. Unbelievable. Where is the door? Says Joanna. Graham and Bushy says, what's the point of having a defence secretary as we don't have any defence? And Mike says, in response to the letter from John Healey, do you remember a few months back at PMQs where the PM said he couldn't change energy policy because that's the rule of the energy secretary? It was a very specific thing that was Ed Miliband's responsibility on that, Mike. That response along with the letter from John Healey shows the PM has no control whatsoever of this cabinet, his policies or the country. He must go, says Mike. Well, plenty more to discuss on all of that. We'll be speaking to the former Defence Secretary, Sir Gavin Williamson, a little bit later on in the programme. We're on the debate desk, though, with Tom and Ebbs, and I want to talk about immigration because there's been so much discussion after that horrific attack on Monday night about immigration, particularly when it comes to Ireland, north and south, and the porous border of what's called the Common Travel Area. That's existed for 100 years, but of course things are very different now, and in Brexit it was of course talked about, and there's going to be a meeting between the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister in Ireland, and Keir Starmer about this very soon, but I don't think they're necessarily going to change anything. It'll all be about enforcement, I would imagine. But there are people smugglers who are guaranteeing UK entry to would-be migrants via Ireland, and the EU deal that'll make Britain more attractive to migrants is something that's been reported about today as well. What is your thought on this, Tom?
A week or so ago, I had dinner with a former colleague who now works in this sort of broad security industry, and he was showing me how open TikTok and WhatsApp messaging is for people smugglers. They're just completely brazen on their advertising their products. I can guarantee you can come in, all you need to do is pay me $5,000 or whatever.
Oh, of course. One of these ads shows a migrant filming inside Dublin Airport with the text, every day, only success, reserve your place, guaranteed passage to England.
Yeah, it's absolutely unbelievable. It's right. And when the Prime Minister came in, his big thing was smash the gangs. And we've seen absolutely no movement on that at all in years. But I think what we actually need, you can understand why people want to come to this country. You can understand. if you're a genuine asylum seeker and you find yourself in a safe country, France is a safe country. Greece.
Can I just stop you just for 1 second? I do apologise. Pamela Nash, who's a Scottish Labour MP, she was the PPS, the Parliamentary Private Secretary to the Ministry of Defence and to John Healey. She's resigned. That's an unpaid role. She's a junior person, but nonetheless, that is significant as well. What's your reaction to that, Tom?
I think that takes the number of resignations sort of past 30 that the Prime Minister's had in a couple of years, and really, when he promised that the grown-ups were back in charge and that he was going to end the chaos and that politics would tread lighter on our lives, I think, oh, goodness sake,
anything but.
He's
got a point, doesn't he?
Unstable. It's just complete instability is happening before our eyes, and it just makes us lose even more faith in the government. What started off as a brand new start with Labour, as you said, it's been a couple of years. It's been as much as 30 people. Have resigned.
I think there's been 21 actual ministers and then at least a dozen unpaid PPSs. In this
there's been quite a lot of those PPSs as well, and Pamela Nash is one of them. She was an MP previously, actually, between 2010 and 2015, and then came back, I'm pretty sure, in 2024 for perhaps a different constituency, but she's gone now as well. This is not good for the Prime Minister, Ebbs.
No, it's not. It's not good. How he must be thinking himself, it's only going to take a couple more people to leave before we become so unstable that no one's going to take us seriously.
And were we perhaps into Boris Johnson territory here? That's what Graham Stringer was saying earlier, when talking about John Healey, Tom.
Yeah, so I was working for Boris at the sort of time of his downfall. The build-up to Boris's downfall was quite long, but actually when it started to go, when the dam broke, it really happened fast.
Was it like momentum kicked in?
It sort of built up over a bit of time, but then suddenly there was one day and just everybody resigned. And
I was sitting in that chair the moment it came through that Rishi Sunak had resigned, and my initial words were, he's gone.
Yeah, and I don't think it's exactly the same for Starmer, because they've got the by-election and Burnham waiting in the wings. I think most of the Labour Party, well, all of the Labour Party now, essentially want rid of the Prime Minister, except for a handful that are in his cabinet. But they can't do anything until Burnham's elected, because Wes Streeting clearly hasn't got enough numbers to topple the Prime Minister, so no one else has. So they're in this weird stalemate position that we can't do anything for 10 days. Burnham will come in, and then it's only a matter of time before he triggers it. The government's in complete chaos, but it can't go anywhere. The Prime Minister's got nowhere to turn. You can't do anything.
What do you think of that, Ebbs?
That's such an interesting... I never really saw it as that, in terms of where, kind of, as you said, in a bit of a, I don't know what the word is, but it's neither here nor there. We're just in purgatory at the moment.
Sort of holding pattern.
Yeah, and
everybody knows where this is going. The Prime Minister will
have an idea.
Well, the Prime Minister surely must know that he's.
He must know he's toast.
He must be sitting.
He must know he's toast.
Now.
There is. It's a matter of how long it takes, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's getting to the stage where it's pretty cruel on the man. Someone just, I mean...
Well, he can always resign when he wants to.
Yeah, but
he wouldn't.
But he wouldn't. Yeah, I don't think...
I think the principle of
if you're Prime Minister, it's pretty hard to resign.
No one ever leaves Downing Street voluntarily, ever.
And he's clearly unfit for the job. He's been proven that he can't lead the country. But he's stuck there. He can't do anything. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to do anything as a country. We're trying to... It's just delaying important decisions. Mm-hmm. Nothing can move. The economy can't grow. The NHS can't get better. As we were talking about immigration, we can't do anything to smash gangs because we've got no one in charge. We can't pass any laws until it's resolved. And the Labour Party really needs to get its act together and sort it out and get a new person in.
Well, Ebbs, what about the Labour Party MPs themselves? Should they make a move on Starmer? I was chatting to someone yesterday, actually, he's pretty well connected in the left of the Labour Party, who said that he didn't think that anything would happen until the autumn, probably because Andy Burnham will wait for... Now, there's a lot of ifs going on here, yes, but Andy Burnham, of course, is the Labour candidate in Makerfield, and we are in a situation where if he wins, which I think he probably will, but we'll see, and then a leadership contest is triggered, that in the person I was speaking to in Parliament's view was that wouldn't happen until the autumn because the election for the Greater Manchester Mayor, the by-election, would have to happen, and he would sort of, out of courtesy, let that happen first and campaign for that person and all the rest of it. So this could actually just be elongated to a huge degree.
Yeah, and it probably will be elongated to a huge degree, and I do think the Labour Party MPs do have it in mind that to look even more unstable as a party is only going to harm the country in the long term. Because we've been through however many different prime ministers.
Do you think they could look any more unstable than they currently do?
Yes, I do think
wow.
so. I absolutely do think so. But what I'm most aware of is because we've had 10 years of this complete instability, it is something which they're mindful of. It's like, how much can we, if we've got to be careful, because we will do untold damage to the country that's already had a pandemic, gone through prime ministers, so much turbulence.
I've just been handed Pamela Nash's resignation letter. She was the Parliamentary Private Secretary to the Secretary of State to Defence and the Defence Ministerial Team. She is a backbench MP, but these roles as PPSs, they're unpaid, but they're very, very important because they're essentially the link of a Secretary of State to the backbenchers. So she's resigned too. She worked pretty directly for John Healey. Now she's resigned. The defence of our nation, Pamela Nash says, is the most important responsibility for any government. The delays and difficulties with securing the necessary funding to progress the defence investment plan has been the latest issue that is damaging the trust of the public in us. We saw this laid bare in last month's election results. Our government's successes are consistently drowned out by mistakes and the failure to be bold when it matters most. This is a Labour MP who until recently was serving with the government. Our country is more divided now than it ever has been in my lifetime, and our political opponents are both the provokers and the beneficiaries. If we cannot provide a strong vision for the UK's future and enact a clear progressive route to get there, then we are allowing the unthinkable for those opponents to take power. Tom?
Well, it's pretty brutal.
I mean, if a Conservative or member of the Reform UK had written that and said, can we please pretend this is a Labour MP? I mean, it's like
a Conservative Party press release.
Exactly.
It's absolutely extraordinary. The country's never been more divided in my lifetime.
Yes,
I mean,
the delays and difficulties with securing the necessary funding to progress the Defence Investment Plan has been the latest issue that is damaging the trust of the public. Our government successes are consistently drowned out by mistakes.
Yeah.
You know,
to be honest, she's just saying what everyone else thinks.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's being honest too, but it's pretty damning, Ebbs.
No, of course, understatement of the year. Of course, it's massively damning. But what I've just said is that I do think Labour MPs want to be mindful of the fact that if there is infighting seen within the party, it's not only going to damage them, not only going to damage our faith in them as a leadership party, but also it will just destabilise us further and bring up more fractures.
OK. Dave in New Zealand, who uses this programme as his breakfast show, and I'm delighted that he does with the time difference, says, haven't heard an opinion from Andy Burnham yet. I thought the media would have been all over him. Tell you what, we'll get the top team behind the scenes to make a call to Burnham's office and say, what do you think, Andy? What do you think of all this? What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Plenty more to discuss on the debate desk next.
I think the trigger for this is people
You think they just did it for no reason whatsoever? You think they rioted last night for no reason?
They took to the streets last night because they were thugs who wanted to engage in violence.
What about the peaceful protesters? There were peaceful protesters all over Northern Ireland as well.
They have a right, as they always should, to protest, but there is always going to be a difference of opinion when it does come to whether it's a legal migrant or an illegal migrant, whether it's a person who has come here to seek refuge or whether it's someone who's come here to work.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Ian has been in touch and says people leaving. It reminds me of the saying about how a business goes bankrupt, first very slowly and then very, very quickly, says Ian. Steve says the time for discussions is long gone. Starmer is useless and needs to go now. We'll continue to discuss all of this. We've got the former Defence Secretary Gavin Williamson coming on the programme in a few minutes' time. But there's just three other topics news stories around today I want to discuss with our debate desk panellists Tom Skinner and Ebs Akintade. NHS treating hundreds of patients a day in cupboards and car parks. The new Health Secretary is James Murray, and he has put out a really bizarre statement on this, actually, if I can just find it here in my pile of papers. Oh, yes, here we are. He says, corridor care is unacceptable. Yeah, that's fine. Undignified and has no place in our NHS. Unfortunately, it does have a place in our NHS. I love these people who say racism has no place in our society. I would love racism to have no place in our society, but it clearly does have a place in our society. I hate that phrasing. Anyway, James Murray, Health Secretary, says corridor care is unacceptable, undignified and has no place in our NHS. That is why, for the first time, we are publishing this data to shine a spotlight on where the problems are greatest and ensure trusts get the support they need, with the vast majority of corridor care concentrated in a small number of organisations. James, you're it. You're it, mate. You're the Health Secretary. Sort it out. Ebs.
I mean, give him time. He's only just been in the job less than a month. He also added, we've already deployed expert teams to help struggling trusts turn performance around, ending corridor care for good. Will take time and different areas will need different solutions. This is fine, and we understand this. I think corridor care, we have to have some jurisdiction over things like winter pressures. We understand that happens. That is unavoidable.
But it happens every year. Care. Surely they should prepare for it every year.
Yeah, but I don't think you can prepare for it every year because there's different... No, you can't. Because there's different strains of flu, there's different strains of bugs that are going around.
You can have, yes, but account for. Doctors, you can say, right, we need this many doctors at this time, we need this many nurses at this time. I mean, the strains can change, but the burden is largely the same, Tom, is it not?
Yeah, I think... I actually think the NHS isn't fit for purpose. I think it's a political sacred cow that no one has the bravery to touch, and I think we need
What would you do? We have a magic wand.
If I was in charge of the government, I would actually make it and try and make it a not political issue. So you'd have a sort of grand cross-party
Royal
Commission type thing to try and take the politics out of it, so you can make decisions over a 50-year period, a 30-year period, 20-year period. There's problems with primary care, in social care, and it's most acute at hospitals because people can't get a GP appointment, so they'll go to A&E because they need help. Then they get stuck in A&E because they can't leave their bed because there's no community
for pharmacists who often get things wrong as well. I mean, some pharmacists are very good, but I went to one once who just gave me completely the wrong advice, and instead I went to Dr. Renee Hunderkamp. Anyway, a couple of other topics I want to talk about. The Green Party proposing a ban on circumcision. Tom?
Yeah. Only the Green Party could be anti-nuclear, anti-NATO, anti-cars, anti-monarchy, anti-meat, anti-planes, anti-business, but pro-foreskin.
What do you think of this policy? Should it get the chop?
Can you stop? I think it's a very random thing to be thinking about. I mean, what does circumcision have to do with the price of anything? I don't understand where that's...
I don't understand why they want to stop. And it's within the Muslim community and predominantly the Jewish community on the 8th day that boys get circumcised. I mean, why do you care? Why do you care what people do with
I think it's infringing,
babies' penises?
It's infringing on parts of life that don't need to be affected. So if you're Jewish, if you're Muslim, it is a vital part of your religion. So I don't think it's something that needs to be... I think it could be mentioned now, never again. Total nonsense.
It's a bit weird. You've got a Jewish leader and loads of Muslims in the Green Party, yet they're proposing this, Ebs.
Are they proposing it, or is it just something that is...
It's being proposed.
Well, I don't think it's going to have legs. I think it's going to be cancelled very quickly and U-turned upon in no time. OK, well, we'll see what happens there. Speaking of body parts getting smaller, Wegovy is now in pill form. Apparently, this is a major announcement that the weight loss drug Wegovy is to be available in pill form in the UK for the first time. Tom, is this something you welcome, worry about? We know about a lot of sort of side effects and things.
Yeah, I'm actually very pro this. When I was at Department of Science, it came across our desk we were going to do a trial of jabs, Okay. And at the time we weren't in a particularly strong position, and we'd said, let's not do this, we'll get branded as the government who's not focusing on issues and just trying to drab the fatties. So we didn't do it. But actually, the health benefits of these drugs and these pills are absolutely extraordinary for people with
there are side effects, and there are long time worse. You worry about the long term
yes,
issues,
I absolutely do, and I maybe I'm ignorant, but I have a strong reservation about all these weight loss drugs and what they mean for the future. If it's a shortcut to losing weight, then I disagree with Wegovy or whatever.
Are you worried about us sort of medicalising an issue that can, through diet and exercise, occur?
Yes, and I don't want it to be a shortcut to losing weight when there are other options available.
But I think the health risks around being obese are so great that actually, if you give people a shortcut, then actually fine, because it's much cheaper for the NHS to not have to deal with someone who's morbidly obese for years and years and years, and all the other things that come along with that.
We don't know the long-term health risks, though, do we?
We know the long-term health risks of being morbidly obese.
Yep.
But is that oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Pete. But is that enough? Because you keep on going on about long-term health effects, Peter. But you're right. You know, what are they in 15, 25 years' time? Are we going to be saying, oh well, this person suffered from cancer because he was taking Wegovy, or this person had this side effect? We don't know yet.
It's the same concern with vaping as well. Listen, yes. This is a long debate. We'll maybe perhaps spend more time on it in the future. For the meantime, thank you both very much indeed. Eb Zakantari, political commentator, and former Number 10 advisor Tom Skinner. Thank you for joining us. And thanks also to Dan and Kent, who says you're all idiots. We have a left-leaning government with 2/3 of Parliament and only 20% of the bleeding vote. They will get every socialist thing through they can. Wake up, Cardi P. I always thought you knew about politics. Obviously not. We have never been in such an unbalanced situation in democracy in the country as now. I'm sorry, Cardi B, but it's not us old farts we care about. It's you lot. Well, listen, I think that I mean you have a point, Dan, but Starmer is very limited in what he can do. We'll see what his successor, whoever that is. Of course, the Makerfield by-election is this day week, actually, and you have the incredibly exciting prospect of me reading out all the candidates in the next hour. We'll also be talking to Sir Gavin Williamson, the former Defence Secretary, about what he makes of the resignation now, not only of the former Defence Secretary, but his bag carrier, Pamela Nash, too. Tell us what you think, too. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you for your company on this dramatic evening, because earlier the Defence Secretary John Healey resigned. Now his Parliamentary Private Secretary Pamela Nash has resigned too, and an equally excoriating letter from her saying that our government's successes are consistently drowned out mistakes and the failure to be bold when it matters most. The defence of our nation is the most important responsibility of any government. She also says our country is more divided now than it ever has been in our lifetime. That could have been a press release written by Reform UK press officers, or indeed Conservative press officers, and here we are with a Labour MP writing that. We'll get the reaction of the former Defence Secretary, Sir Gavin Williamson, in a second. We'll find out what his party leader thinks as well, and we'll find out what you think. This is a big and difficult evening for Keir Starmer. We'll talk about immigration too. We'll talk about what's going on in Northern Ireland. We'll also be talking a little bit later on about the NHS treating hundreds of patients a day in cupboards and car parks. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, a WhatsApp voice note, or you can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on the Evening Exchange. Well, thank you to Zarina, who says since Brexit, each and every administration has failed the people. Is this failure linked to the civil service, who have never accepted leave, or is it, as I voted to leave, related to incompetent people not fit to serve because they're too heavily dependent on the rules made by the EU? It's a disgrace, says Zarina. Well, it's been a big, dramatic political day, and there has been reaction to the excoriating letter, not just from Pamela Nash, but in this case, when it comes to this clip, from Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party, from this letter from John Healey, who has resigned as Defence Secretary. You've been unable, Prime Minister, and the Treasury has been unwilling to commit the resources that the nation needs to defend the country at this time of rising threats, he wrote. He also wrote that the financial settlement when it comes to defence, which I was first given on full on Monday afternoon this week, falls well short of what is required for defence and the country at this dangerous time. Here is how the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, has reacted to that.
John Healey has done the honourable thing. Yesterday, I raised the issue of the Defence Investment Plan, and the Prime Minister exposed the fact that he was not going to put money into defence to the amount that was required. And I'm sure John Healey sat there listening to the Prime Minister tell me that he was increasing defence funding when he is not. He has done the honourable thing and resigned. I am glad that he agrees with me that we need to put more money into defence, but what is shocking is what he's written in his letter, where he says that the Prime Minister is making the country less safe and putting our troops at risk at a time of increasing threats.
John Hutton, Lord Hutton, spoke to Times Radio earlier on today about this. He's a former Labour Defence Secretary. We'll speak to a former Conservative Defence Secretary in just a minute, but let's hear what Lord Hutton said earlier.
It's a car crash, isn't it, really? I think in political terms, I don't think you could exaggerate the mess that we've found ourselves in. And I think for John's successor, it's a really difficult choice that he or she is going to face, because if the numbers remain the same, if it's 13.5 billion, netted off the 3.5 billion that the Treasury want to account for in efficiency gains, it's not a sufficiently adequate amount of money to do both things that need to be done, which is to point us in the direction of the SDR and its new capabilities that it says we needed, and also to get us on a pathway to 3.5% of GDP on defence. And that dilemma is going to face the John Healey's successor, and he or she is going to face a hell of a hurdle to get over on this.
Sir Gavin Williamson is a former Conservative Defence Secretary and joins me now. Sir Gavin, good evening.
Good evening.
When you, as a Conservative MP, see a Defence Secretary writing to the Prime Minister, you've been unable and the Treasury has been unwilling to commit the resources that the nation needs to defend the country at this time of rising threats. When you see that person's PPS, Pamela Nash, writing, our country is more divided now than it ever has been in my lifetime. We saw this laid bare in last month's election results. The delays and difficulties, Pamela Nash writes, with securing the necessary funding to progress the Defence Investment Plan has been the latest issue that is damaging the trust of the public in us. This could have come from Conservative HQ. A press officer could have written that. They're doing your work for them, are they not, this evening?
Well, John has obviously been battling with both Number 10 and Treasury for months now, and this is why you've had such a long delay on this defence investment plan. But it's got to a point where the Prime Minister has had to make a choice, and the Prime Minister's choice has been to not step up to what is needed in terms of delivering the type of investment and the type of uplift in expenditure that's required in order to keep us safe. So you can see this is almost a letter of total despair, where a man's worked very hard to try and deliver what's required, but the Prime Minister's just sided with the Treasury.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Gavin, when you see where this is coming from. Is this just under Labour, or, I mean, many people saying that the Conservatives have a case to answer here as well? Who's to blame? We also had Graham Stringer, the Labour MP, earlier on this evening saying that he thinks Rachel Reeves should resign.
Well, I think that I think Graham speaks a lot of truth there, because obviously she's the one who's held out and actually sort of understood the price of everything and the value of nothing here. But Starmer, the Prime Minister, is equally the one that's taken her side. You know, we've seen an incredible change in terms of the threat picture. I remember back in 2017, 2018, when I was warning about the fact that actually some of the challenges that we're facing are growing, but actually the threats that we face today are just even greater than they were just 2 or 3 years ago. And the level of investment and the level of armament, rearmament that we're going to have to undertake is vast. And Treasury and the Prime Minister are just not willing to contemplate what's needed. And this isn't just politicians saying this. This isn't just John Healey. This isn't just Lord Robertson. This isn't just John Hutton, another former Labour Defence Secretary. But it's actually the generals, it's the air marshals, it's the admirals, it's anyone that has an understanding of this, that knows that we've got to make this investment, because deterrence is the best way of preventing conflict. But we need to make the investment in our armed forces today, not in another 5 or 10 years' time.
Where does the money come from, Gavin? What would you cut?
I readily accept there's some really difficult decisions that have to be made here. This is why I think Kemi was incredibly generous just a few weeks ago when she said to the Prime Minister, I know that you have to make tough decisions. I know that you've got a really hard choices to make, but I'm willing to sit around the table and take this out of party politics. This is a national issue that is going to transcend multiple governments, because we've got to make the investments not just for the next 2, 3, 4 years, but for a generation. And she was saying, I'm happy to sit down with you and look at where needs to be cut, not take party political advantage of it when those cuts have to be made, but actually work with you on some of those tough choices. That might be on welfare, that might be on other areas of government expenditure, but actually make sure this isn't a political game. And that big thinking is the approach that we need to have. But the Prime Minister just threw it back in her face. He wasn't willing to
Would you honestly, when you were Defence Secretary, Gavin, would you honestly have sat down with, I think it was John Healey at the time, perhaps, who was Shadow Defence Secretary, and say, right, I want your views on what we should cut? Would you honestly have had that conversation?
Well, you would have had the conversation about how you can get the level of defence investment up there. And actually, it's a national issue. It isn't a single party issue. It's for the whole of Parliament. Because this isn't, as I say, this isn't something that's just going to impact this government. It's going to be something that impacts multiple governments. And this is why we've got to get the investment right. And the key question is, and you rightly challenged me, what are you going to cut? And what Kemi was offering is to take some of the politics out of that, sit down with the government and actually have those discussions.
But surely that's all well and good, but surely that bleeds into things that are nakedly political, like welfare, for example. You can say for as long as you want, look, defence or the NHS or whatever, these are two big issues that we have to think long term on. We have to be united, set up a royal commission, or as you say, have political leaders from various parties coming around a table to discuss this. But you're going to have to take the money from somewhere. You, for example, your party disagrees with the government on net zero. For example, Kemi Badenoch has changed the Conservative Party's mind on that with her new policy on that. if you were arguing, well, we can just take the money from net zero, the Labour government will say, well, no, we can't, because this is incredibly important, although, of course, they have talked about taking some money from it recently. But the point, I suppose, is that you can talk about it, it can only go so far, can't it, when everybody politically is looking to the next election?
You're right, but what Kemi set out there was a willingness to talk about some of these issues and actually be willing to defend sometimes unpopular decisions in order to do the right thing for the country. If a Prime Minister doesn't want to have that discussion with a leader of the opposition, that's totally within his powers. But he's ultimately reached a decision where he's not willing to take the tough decisions and put the investment to keep this country safe. That's the only reason why one of his most loyal cabinet ministers has walked away, because he couldn't stand there with any credibility and say what has been put forward is anywhere near enough to keep this country safe. And whoever follows John Healey is going to be faced with the exact same issue, unless, frankly, Starmer is willing to show some real leadership and actually take some tough decisions. But everything has so far indicated that that is not something he is going to be willing to do.
Really interesting to talk about the loyalty aspect of this. Wes Streeting is many things. I'm not sure you could argue he was necessarily the most loyal to Keir Starmer. We've had in the last couple of weeks both the Health Secretary and the Defence Secretary going to absolutely key roles in the Cabinet. We've got the Makerfield by-election this time next week that could have an MP elected in Andy Burnham, who's the Labour candidate. I just wonder where you think the Prime Minister is at the moment. Is he just treading water until there's a leadership election? Is he paralysed? Can he actually do anything? And I suppose the question many people as well will be asking this evening, has he even got the political authority to appoint another Defence Secretary? Because we're sitting here at 8:15 and there isn't anybody at the helm.
Well, the reality is that the Prime Minister doesn't have the political acumen, the political authority, and increasingly no moral authority as well. And what you're seeing is a government that's completely paralysed, and you're seeing a Prime Minister that just doesn't know which way to turn. And he's not willing to make the right decisions to keep this country safe. And, Wes Streeting resigned for various reasons. John Healey resigned because he was being asked to do something that was going to make this country less safe, and he wasn't willing to do that. The Prime Minister is going to have great difficulty appointing anyone into that role, and them having any ability or credibility to sell this plan, unless there is a substantial amount of extra money coming forward in order to support our armed forces. Because, by this approach, he talks tough. He went to Munich Security Conference. He said, we were facing war, we're facing threats, yet he leaves us naked and not taking the action that's required.
I was always told, by a very senior person in the Rishi Sunak number 10, that when it comes to leadership elections, forget Grant Shapps and his spreadsheet. The real former Defence Secretary you want to talk to is Gavin Williamson. He knows how all these things work behind the scenes. What advice would you give to Andy Burnham if he wants to run a leadership election?
Well, if he's going to want to run a leadership election, he's got to be able to count. And he's got to be able to have a set of core principles in terms of that he's going to be able to sell to his party, that is going to demonstrate that the Labour Party has changed and it's going to move away from the drift that we've seen for the last 2 years since they came in. But all leadership elections based on the parliamentary stage is all based on numbers, and most politicians can't actually count and don't know how to whip.
OK, well, former Chief Whip, former Defence Secretary Gavin Williamson can't be accused of either of those things. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. Really appreciate it. That's former Defence Secretary Sir Gavin Williamson. What do you think of what he said there? 0344 499 1000. Mark says defence is more important than net zero welfare, the NHS, and even my pension. The only thing more important is that summer we're going to completely run out of water because of a lack of reservoir construction. Paul says Miliband should resign or be sacked with a stupid net zero. What's more important, net zero or the defence of a country? Says, great show. Starmer needs to leave before we drag him. Sorry, that's Mark there. Another Mark says, Starmer, take tough decisions. He can't even take an easy decision. I'm amazed he can choose what clothes to wear. Well, the ones that are bought by Lord Ali. Melanie wants to talk about circumcision. Islamic female genital mutilation is condemned over here, and quite rightly so. Why is Jewish male baby circumcision not condemned as such? Mutilating a small part of an innocent baby's genitalia is acceptable. It's disgusting. It should be made illegal and should result in a prison sentence for child abuse. Really, Melanie? I'm not sure it should. It's a recognised medical procedure. That is, it is a ceremonial and religious thing when it comes to Jewish people, but it happens all the time for lots of other reasons as well. Lots of people get circumcised for all sorts of reasons. There have been complications from circumcision and increased infections for young boys because of this, says Melanie. I'm not sure I agree with you, Melanie. I mean, there have been infections, certainly, but it's sometimes because of infections that people have circumcisions in the first place. Pete in West Yorkshire says, I just caught the back end of your topic regarding circumcision, and the Greens are saying all circumcisions are just on religious grounds. So they're saying all of them. They want to ban it. I had to be circumcised twice due to medical issues, so how would the Greens address that? Well, I think you're absolutely right, and there are circumstances in which people need to be circumcised anyway. Strange topic, but nonetheless one on which people clearly have opinions. Arguably less interesting is the list of candidates in the Makerfield by-election. By law, I have to read these out, so please do bear with me, but it has to be done, and we're happy to comply with the law. The full list for the Makerfield by-election, which is a week today, Thursday the 18th. Jake Austin for the Liberal Democrats is standing, as is Count Binface of the Count Binface Party, Andy Burnham for the Labour Party, Dan Clark for the Libertarian Party, John Dyer is an independent, Ed Gemmell for the Climate Party, Paul Gould an independent, Alan Howling Lord Hope for the official Munster Raving Looney Party, Robert Kenyon for Reform UK, Robert Pownall for Protect the Wild, Rebecca Shepherd for Restore Britain, Sarah Wakefield for the Green Party, Peter Ward for Rejoin EU, and Michael Winstanley for the Conservative Party. You probably know that the FIFA World Cup kicks off tonight, and our friends at talkSPORT are sending you and a friend straight to New York with Adidas, the tournament's official match ball supplier. It's the ultimate trip to watch England face Panama live at the MetLife Stadium. Return flights, hotel, match tickets and spending money all taken care of. Plus Adidas is throwing in the official Trionda match ball and a fresh pair of boots. So don't miss out. Here is how to enter.
For your chance to win, head to our friends at talksportwin.com or text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close on the 12th of June 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talksportwin.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
I think the trigger for this is people.
You think they just did it for no reason whatsoever? You think they rioted last night for no reason?
They took to the streets last night because they were thugs who wanted to engage in violence.
What about the peaceful protesters? There were peaceful protesters all over Northern Ireland as well.
They have a right, as they always should, to protest, but there is always going to be a difference of opinion when it does come to whether it's a legal migrant or an illegal migrant, whether it's a person who has come here to seek refuge or whether it's someone who's come here to work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Al Cairns has resigned as Armed Forces Minister. That is the second Defence Minister after John Healey, the Defence Secretary, has resigned today, as has the Parliamentary Private Secretary Pamela Nash as well. So that's 3 members of the political defence team that has gone. Al Cairns' letter is just on the screen in front of me now. We're reacting in real time now. He says we owe those who serve the UK the kit to do the job and the loyalty to stand by them when it's done. We are failing on both. I've spent my whole time in government making that case. Number 10 will not listen, so I am resigning as Minister for the Armed Forces, says Al Cairns. I'm reading this letter in real time, but I'll pick out a couple of bits for you. I'll not read the whole thing. It has been the privilege of my life to serve this country, first in uniform and then in government. We remember that Al Cairns was, of course, a very senior military officer. It'll always be denied, but he was in the SBS, I know for sure, the Special Boat Service. I've said that there are issues facing this department that do not lend themselves to easy answers, and that there need to be agreement during the government about the scale and the challenges we face. It has become clear to me, says Al Cairns in his resignation letter to the Prime Minister, that the change I had pushed for is not going to come. Given the situation, I've decided to resign as Minister for the Armed Forces. We face a more unstable and dangerous world than at any point in recent decades, and having spent most of my adult life in uniform, I understand what public service in such a moment demands. It is for this very reason I cannot continue. I have watched, as a Marine, what the war looks like now. I have spoken to those who have seen it up close in Ukraine. The lesson is uncomfortable and it is unambiguous. The character of conflict is changing faster than our procurement can keep up with, says Al Cairns. We are still purchasing capability suitable for the last war while our adversaries arm for the next one. That is absolutely damning. Platforms that cost billions can be defeated by systems that cost thousands. Any serious defence investment plan has to start from that reality. I've sat in rooms, seen the assessments, spoken to the commanders who will be asked to do more with less, and I cannot in good conscience stand at the dispatch box and defend a level of investment I know to be inadequate to the task. A serious country funds its defence to meet the threat it actually faces, not the threat I wish it, or not the threat it wished it faced. The same instinct, this is going to be an interesting one as well, because of we've covered the issues of Northern Ireland on many, many occasions as well, and prosecuting veterans, and Al Cairns has been certainly criticised for that at various points, and in his resignation letter he talks about that. The same instinct, he writes, that serious problems can be managed rather than faced, runs through the Northern Ireland Legacy Bill. I have worked to fix the bill from the inside, but it remains unfit for purpose. It risks failing the very veterans it claims to protect, men and women I served with, those I buried, friends alongside, people who did their duty under conditions most individuals in Westminster will never have to imagine. This is a really damning thing. I thought Pamela Nash's letter was damning. My goodness. Al Cairns continues in his resignation letter to the Prime Minister. I set out the changes I believe were necessary on the lines which I could not in good conscience go beyond. Those lines have not been accepted. I've run out of room to argue this case honourably from inside government. A serving minister cannot ask fellow veterans to trust a process he no longer trusts himself. This guy, until literally 5 minutes ago, was Armed Forces Minister of the United Kingdom. Then he's writing this in a letter. The two failures are the same failures. We ask soldiers to fight for our country. In return, we owe them the kit to do the job and the loyalty to stand by them when it's done. We are failing on both. The same failure of seriousness runs through how this country treats the people it asked most of, in uniform and out of it. I wasn't going to read this whole letter. It's explosive stuff. Al Cairns continues. Too many working people in this country feel insecure even when they are doing everything right. They work hard, contribute, pay their taxes and still feel one setback away from trouble. Public confidence in our institutions is weakening and politics increasingly looks performative while everyday life gets harder. The machinery of government itself has been left to decay. Decisions that should take days take months. Departments fight each other instead of the problem. Officials and ministers who know the truth are not always rewarded for telling it. We are trying to govern a more dangerous world with processes designed for a calmer one, and the gap is now showing in the things that matter most. This is astonishing. If my resignation accelerates the transition towards resolution, then the impact will far outweigh the act. We need a new way of governing, and we need it now. For my own part, says Al Cairns, I keep arguing for a politics rooted in resilience, seriousness and national renewal, for a country where people working can once again feel secure about the future, and for the service personnel and veterans this government still has a duty to. I keep fighting for the people I served with. I hope this government will too. The deal this country makes with the people who serve it in uniform in classrooms and building sites is broken. I'm going to spend my time in the backbenches trying to fix it, says Al Cairns, Member of Parliament for Birmingham Sellyoak. Remember, this isn't nobody. This is a former senior officer in the Marines, in the Special Boat Service. He has so many accolades. He won the Military Cross, for which you only get for huge bravery. He has an OBE. He has a Distinguished Service Order as well. He's someone who only entered politics a couple of years ago. Look how disillusioned he is in that. Absolutely astonishing. Peter in Dorset is on the line and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Peter, what do you make of this?
Hello there. A very good evening to you.
Good evening.
We have, unfortunately, as Prime Minister of this country, we have probably the best actor this country has. All we get is lip service. When he's speaking, he is just telling you how some other Prime Minister would maybe verbally portray a situation to the nation. And what is happening is that we are having the willful destruction of the country internally. We are having the willful destruction of our defence forces. And if you can imagine, any self-respecting member of this country would not be behaving in this way, crippling our economy, crippling everything in sight they can touch, and causing the people of this country to feel like they are second-class citizens. And as we speak, people are arriving in this country. We don't know where they're coming from. And imagine that this party are going to be here for another 2 years or so. What on earth are we going to find at the bottom of it? And the defence situation is past embarrassing. I honestly that we have a nucleus of people who are at the centre of government in this country who are completely hell-bent on the ruination of this country. And I do not believe I am talking from an extreme situation. I've been on this program before. I mentioned a long time ago with things like the Chinese embassy that's going to be built right next door to the financial institutions, the cozying up of everywhere, and what is going to happen next? This cozying of Fabianism is going to creep across back into Europe, and we are absolutely in all my life, I have never been so scared for this country as I am now. I do find myself awake at night at times just thinking about it. And
I'm sorry to hear that, Peter. I mean, I just think there are a lot of people who really feel the direction of this country is not good, and we've got a Ministry of Defence where we don't currently, as I speak to you right now, have a Defence Secretary, have an Armed Forces Minister, and the MP who supports them, Pamela Nash, has also resigned as well. We have a defence investment plan that is not fit for purpose, according to those three people, three Labour MPs. You've got a Prime Minister who's under a huge amount of pressure. You have a by-election this time next week. Maybe his successor will be elected there. You've got Al Cairns. I mean, to me, that letter, which I read out a second ago, and I know you're on the line to listen to, Peter, it sounded like a leadership pitch to me. Maybe he's done a deal with Andy Burnham, we don't know, but clearly Al Cairns is really, really at the end of his tether when it comes to how this government is doing. And those are people who have served in this government on the inside, seeing it for day to day. You, Peter, and me are experiencing it as citizens of this country, and we're not happy either. What you've just said there, Peter, is a really damning indictment of this Prime Minister.
Well, it isn't just a Prime Minister, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The people who are trying, like Miliband, trying to stop all our North Sea supplies, and we're having to bring in imported fuel into this country, and we're using the same amount in this country as we were if we were using our own. And we couldn't even, we could be even in a situation of exporting it, never mind just using it for ourselves. But this country, this government has absolutely no idea how to run an economy, and all it's trying to do is making sure they don't want to cut the welfare budget because they want to keep supplying the migrants with all the rubbish that is going on at the moment.
Well, Peter, we're going to talk about that. Okay, Peter, thanks for your call. We're going to talk about that next, actually, about the immigration system in this country. And there's some breaking news as well, and that is the counter-terror officers are leading the investigation into a stabbing at a Manchester school on Tuesday, in which a boy and girl, both 14 and a 27-year-old man, were injured. A 14-year-old girl was subsequently detained under the Mental Health Act. So now counter-terror officers are involved in that after the stabbing at the Manchester school on Tuesday. We will talk about the immigration system in this country and what's happening in Northern Ireland as well. There are no real reports of any serious disturbances in Northern Ireland, but we know there are protests continuing in Belfast tonight. If there's anything on that, of course, we will bring it to you. But the major breaking news in the last 15 minutes is that the Armed Forces Minister, Al Cairns, has now resigned following the resignation earlier today of the Defence Secretary. We also know that an MP who supports them, Pamela Nash, has resigned too. All three letters have been absolutely damning of the Prime Minister. And just to bring you one tiny bit of what Al Cairns has said as well, the former Armed Forces Minister, he is, I don't think I've ever seen a letter actually written with as much damning indictment of how the government is doing things. And he says, I've watched as a Marine, of course he served in uniform very, very bravely for many years, what war looks like now. I've spoken to those who have seen it up close in Ukraine. The lesson is uncomfortable and it is ambiguous. The character of conflict is changing faster than our procurement can keep up with. He's also absolutely slams the government on the Northern Ireland Legacy Bill as well. He says the machinery of government has been left to decay. National resilience is about more than defence in the narrow sense. If my resignation accelerates the transition before resolution, then the impact will far outweigh the act. We need a new way of governing, and we need it now. He says he will keep arguing for politics rooted in resilience, seriousness and national renewal for a country where working people can once again feel secure about the future. The deal this country makes with the people who serve it in uniform in classrooms on building sites is broken. I'm going to spend my time on the backbenches trying to fix it. I'll keep fighting for the people I serve with too. I hope this government will too. Absolutely damning from him, from John Healey and from Pamela Nash too. It's an astonishing evening in politics. It's a difficult evening for people in Northern Ireland. We'll be talking about all those issues and everything else between now and 10. I'll be speaking to some great guests. The Shadow Defence Minister, Mark Francois, is coming up in a few minutes' time. We'll talk about the fallout from Al Cairns too, and I want to hear from you on all of this. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about the immigration system next, particularly when it comes to Northern Ireland and the real dangers to the whole of the United Kingdom because of the open border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Stay with us here on Talk and get your call in. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Elise has been in touch and says, wow, Al Carnes' letter, that is definitely a leadership pitch in her view. Daryl from an ever-growing Lincoln has been in touch and says, I've been saying that this country is overpopulated for the last 20 years when I was working in the emergency services, and I could see the ambulance service and the NHS struggling with lack of resources and overcrowded hospitals then. All our services, energy, our infrastructure, road networks, every single problem we have in this country goes back to being overpopulated. When will our government see this as the root cause of all our problems? I've seen this happening for decades. It's unfathomable that the people who are supposed to be the clever ones are so mind-numbingly stupid, says Daryl. Let's speak to Dr. S. Chelvin, who's head of Immigration and Civil Liberties at 33 Bedford Row Chambers. He's a barrister. He knows this back to front. Dr. Chelvin, thank you for joining me. I think there's a real worry and perhaps even just more of an awareness actually this week because of the system in Northern Ireland and the porous border there through the common travel area. That common travel area, as I'm sure you know, has existed for about 100 years. It was negotiated and talked about quite a lot during Brexit, of course, too. But there are statistics that we've been hearing about. The UK has only returned one asylum seeker to Ireland since the post-Brexit deal in 2020. The government says it's preparing to crack down on the border route being used as a backdoor for illegal immigration after the Belfast attack earlier this week. Is that even possible?
Well, I think the easiest way to solve this situation is go back to joining the European Union, because that's what happened when we had the European Union.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Regulations. So
I don't think that's going to happen.
You know that's the answer, but you know that is the simple answer to your callers who are concerned about individuals not being able to be returned to Europe and Britain becoming a so-called soft touch.
Okay, well, realistically, that's not going to happen.
But realistically, I mean, this is what people are saying. 2/3 of the British electorate think that Brexit was a complete mess and shambles.
17.4 million people at the time when asked urged to leave. But
10 years
let's not get into that. Let's accept for the purposes of the question that that's not going to happen in the near future and talk about what can be done under the current arrangements.
Well, look, what can be done to stop the people smugglers that I've said to on your show many a time is that all we need to do is open up a registration centre in northern France to register those asylum claims, and those individuals can be transported legally to the UK mainland without abusing any system. We know that the majority of those who go to France to claim asylum stay in France. They don't come to the UK. So that's what we need to do. Instead of the hundreds of millions of pounds we're spending to the French government to try and smash the gangs, the reason why the gangs have this market and supply and demand is that the UK has, since the 28th of June 2022, for the introduction of Section 40 of the Nationality and Borders Act 2022, classed those migrants who come undocumented to the UK and claim asylum as illegal and criminal. They weren't illegal before. All this nonsense about 2018, 70, 80, 100,000 coming by boats who are illegal, that's rubbish. That wasn't illegal by law. So it's very important that we can solve this question, because up to September 2011, the last Labour government, as we know, 2010, 17,900 were the number of asylum applications in 2010, okay. The lowest on record in the last Labour government. First year of the coalition of the Lib Dems and Conservatives, up to September 2011, a refugee could go to their neighbouring country and go to the British High Commission or Embassy and claim asylum, comes to the UK.
Okay.
That policy was stopped. So all we need to do to smash the gangs is open up a registration centre in northern France.
Tell me whether that would have stopped or whether that could stop people coming across the Irish border, because what is to stop, maybe this is a naive question, but what is to stop another person, another Sudanese national, flying to France, then flying to Dublin, and then taking the bus up to Northern Ireland? There just seems to me to be a complete lack of knowledge and appreciation of that porous border and immigration enforcement under the current system. You've given your idea of a solution, and that's fine, but the point is that under the current solution, the current arrangement, you're going to have this meeting between the Prime Minister and the Taoiseach, the Irish Prime Minister, later this week. That is not going to change things in terms of the common travel area.
No, Peter, be very careful. The individual travelling from France to Ireland would have the necessary visa to enter the European Union before going to France and then before going to Ireland. That's very important. So they cannot just get on a plane because of the civil penalties of airlines carrying passengers who don't have the proper visa documents. So that couldn't happen. They couldn't get from France to Ireland without the proper visa documents. That's very important. So that wouldn't happen.
But then this particular suspect, and there are live proceedings involved in this, and we'll be very careful what we say about the case.
I'm not going to comment, yeah.
But we know, and this is not related to what he did or didn't do, we know from the police telling us that someone arriving in Dublin from another part of the EU simply got the bus up to Belfast, as many people have done, as people smugglers have talked about, and that porous border exists. And that, to me, is at least as big a threat to our sovereignty and to our immigration system than the boats coming across the channel.
Okay, I'm going to pause there. I'm not going to talk about anything in relation to this case.
Let's talk about a hypothetical person who claims asylum in Northern Ireland.
Okay, so if they claim asylum in Northern Ireland, and they're coming from Ireland to Northern Ireland, they haven't entered the United Kingdom illegally, yeah? Okay, because of this
common travel area,
Yeah. Okay, so the point being here is, why do we have this so-called porous border? We have this porous border because we've had to implement that because of the vote for the referendum in 2016. We're going back to the same issue. The issue which is driving
it's existed since 1920, but of course, yes, as you say, or the 20s, I should say, but as you correctly say, the circumstances changed when it came to Brexit, so that's correct.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is correct. So we need to get rid of Brexit.
But that's not going to happen. I mean, it's just not going to happen.
If your viewers want a stop to this happening, they need to get out of Brexit and get back into the European Union.
Okay. You've made that view clear, and that's fine. That's a perfectly legitimate position to have. But I would put to you that I think that is. I'm not saying it should or shouldn't happen. I'm saying that it is highly unlikely that it happens.
So to stop the people smugglers, you open up the registration centre in Northern France, so they don't need to go from France to Dublin and go across the border from Dublin, Northern Ireland, because they can go to the registration centre in Northern France, register their claims.
Is there anything, from your knowledge of immigration law, is there anything that can be done within the current law without rejoining the EU, which you made it very, very clear is your suggestion, and that's fine, that's a perfectly legitimate view. Is there anything that can be done within the common travel area legislation, within what happens now, to stop people who shouldn't be coming entering the UK and, in theory, posing a threat to us?
Well, okay, now there are two issues there. One, in relation to crossing the border, yes, and two, those who cause a threat. So let's do the crossing the border issue. Of course, people will cross borders legally or illegally. Yes, and that's what we have at the moment with the gun.
So immigration enforcement is the way to deal with that, in your view, is it?
Well, that's the point. Yes.
Okay.
Of course, it's immigration enforcement, but the point being is that those who cause a threat. Now, what's quite interesting, even in your reference to the Manchester incident a few moments ago, that the mental health services have had to be called in. What we have with, first of all, can I just say in relation to what's happening in Belfast at the moment, of course, my primary thoughts are with Steve Ogilvie and his family.
Absolutely.
Because what we always do in relation to those who are victims of these atrocities, is just Henry Novak and his family as well. But with Ali Haddad, this was somebody who was lawfully in the United Kingdom with refugee status. Okay, forget about mode of entry. He was recognised as a refugee. Now, importantly, in relation to that, we know that he committed this, what we alleged, committed, I'm being very careful with that, in relation to the knife attack on this NHS radiographer, Steve Ogilvie. This person clearly had mental health issues. Even Jonathan Hall, in his most recent comments regarding national security and immigration, made it quite clear that we have to be careful regarding his background. I covered that issue in an interview with your colleague Petri Hoskins last night. So the issue there is this: it comes from Sudan. Jonathan Hall made it quite clear there's a national security advisor in relation to the issue with respect to his background, because we know in Sudan that young men face horrific atrocities in relation to being tortured or war and conflict and these issues. So what we have here, and even in the Nottingham case of the students, we have a failure of our services in relation to mental health reliance. This is not somebody who is just a refugee committed this crime. This is an individual who has been highlighted, even by Jonathan Hall, may have been subjected to quite horrific past persecution. That's a narrative or background in relation to what happened beforehand, and therefore was at risk. And what happened with the mental health services and support?
Thank you, Dr. Shelvin. Just on a point of fact, I think you slightly misspoke there. This is not. I'm not playing any points or anything. I think you slightly misspoke because the person has been charged with threatening to kill an NHS radiographer, but Stephen Ogilvie himself wasn't an NHS radiographer. They're two separate people. So yeah, we'll just clarify that point just to get the facts right. But I really appreciate your contribution to the programme, Dr. Shelvin. I'm sure you appreciate how we need to be accurate in all of that. So thank you for your patience with that. Dr. S. Shelvin there, who is a barrister, an immigration barrister. Many thanks to him for his thoughts. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. We're going to speak to a broadcaster and journalist who suggested and predicted, in fact, that Al Cairns would resign today. We'll talk to her about Belfast too and what's happening there. Northern Ireland leaders have condemned racist thuggery. It does seem to be a little bit quieter tonight in terms of those protests, both peaceful and non-peaceful. We'll get the latest from Linda Jubilee in just a second. Stay with us.
I think the trigger for this is people using it.
You think they just did it for no reason whatsoever? You think they rioted last night for no reason?
They took to the streets last night because they were thugs who wanted to engage in violence.
What about the peaceful protesters? There were peaceful protesters all over Northern Ireland as well.
They have a right, as they always should, to protest, but there is always going to be a difference of opinion when it does come to whether it's a legal migrant or an illegal migrant, whether it's a person who has come here to seek refuge or whether it's someone who's come here to work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Fascinating on Al Cairns, just been reading his letter properly in the break there. And Linda Jubilee, the broadcaster and journalist, actually predicted that he would resign today. Some of the stuff in here, Linda, great to have you on the programme, by the way. It's become clear to me the change I pushed for is not going to come while I had no hand in the defence investment plan. That distance does allow me to say plainly it is not built for the threat we face. It is neither transformative enough nor sufficiently funded. We're asking our armed forces to operate in a more dangerous world on a budget written for a calmer one. I've sat in the room, seen the assessments and spoken to the commanders who will be asked to do more with less. And I cannot in good conscience stand at the dispatch box and defend a level of investment I know to be inadequate to the task. We ask soldiers to fight for this country, says Al Cairns. The Armed Forces Minister has just resigned. In return, we owe them the kit to do the job and the loyalty to stand by them when it's done. We are failing on both. This comes after the Defence Secretary, John Healey, has resigned. His sidekick, backbench MP Pamela Nash, his Parliamentary Private Secretary, has gone too. Linda, you predicted this morning.
Well, to be fair, I always call good contacts. I'm a very old-fashioned journalist in that regard. So I called.
You check facts as well, I hear, which is just it's really out of fashion these days, Linda.
Oh, it's essential. So this morning, at noon, in fact, I called a senior military strategist who's unfortunately wasn't in the country, but I got hold of him and I said, what do you think will happen next? And he said, I believe that Al Carnes will resign. And we had a conversation about that. And that's because Al Carnes is, a former senior commander in the Royal Marines. He could not live with this, I don't believe, morally, ethically, or professionally. And he knows now that we are at the stage where we simply can't defend the realm at this level of money. It's just impossible to do it. So, I'm sure he had no choice. He was between a rock and a hard place, and he resigned, as indeed John Healey outlined very clearly too.
Absolutely astonishing letter from Al Carnes. Similarly, Pamela Nash said that delays and difficulties securing the necessary funding to progress the Defence Investment Plan has been the latest issue that is damaging trust of the public in us. Our country is more divided now than it ever has been in my lifetime. Healey himself, the Defence Secretary until earlier today, saying the financial settlement falls well short of what is required for defence and the country at this dangerous time. You, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, have been unable, and the Treasury has been unwilling, to commit the resources that the nation needs to defend the country at this time of rising threat. I mean, these are three of his own MPs. This isn't Conservative Party press office, Linda.
No. And can I just say, you just highlighted the two important words in one very important sentence, and they are Keir Starmer is unable to deal with this, which means that he is not a leader, and the Treasury are unwilling to do it, which means that they are unwilling to be led. That is why this is absolutely catastrophic, and I believe we're now at the beginning of the end for Keir Starmer. I think the whole house of cards could crumble very quickly because of this, because of the huge reputational damage that has been caused with our NATO allies. The Pentagon will be apoplectic about this, I am sure. And it's just a clear sign that we are unable to prioritise our spending. At the end of the day, the military asked for £28 billion. They were given reason to believe it would be 18 billion. It's now cut to 13.5 billion, which means there is no credible pathway to defence spending of 3.5% on GDP. And that is a very serious misfire, to use a military term.
Did you go back to your source after Al Carnes resigned? Has he got back to you, he or she got back to you in regard to their response, given that that prediction was correct?
Yeah, he texted immediately. I texted him and then he texted back and said, well, he didn't think it took a rocket scientist to work it out, because if you just had to look at the facts of the matter, and it was clearly impossible for Al Carnes to move forward. And, he has been mooted as a leader of the Labour Party. Yeah. What's against him? He doesn't really have enough political experience. So why would he accept what has become, very sadly, a poison chalice and ruin his own political career? Of course he's not going to do it. The question is, who is going to be the next Defence Secretary? And at the moment, it is a shocking and shameful situation that in the midst of one of the most dangerous periods since the end of the Cold War, we do not have a Defence Secretary.
Well, we'll see between now and 10 o'clock whether one is appointed. Linda, thank you. Linda Jubilee there, broadcaster and journalist, on Al Carnes' resignation. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch about all these different issues. Trev in Manchester says, it's time to go now, Starmer. You've finally broken this country. Job done, so go. Mark says, I cannot believe what I'm hearing, how there hasn't been a revolution in Britain. I don't know. Very, very illuminating. Thank you for interviewing him earlier on, as at least now we know what people think. I've heard lots of caricatures like your last guest talking about Dr. Chelvin, but to hear the madness straight from the horse's mouth is a revelation in Mark's view. Sue says, if I were the EU, they would be dictating our quota. As it is, there should be a complete veto on all immigration. We're overpopulated and we have thousands who should not be in our country. We have a serious enemy within, never mind the external threat. And on Dr. Shelvin as well, Dave in New Zealand says, what is this lunatic talking about Europe was the main supplier of illegal immigrants? Talk about making us the dumping ground for the third world. Mark in Somerset says, what a great call from Peter in Dorset. I agree. I would love to have a pint with him and put the world to rights. Great show tonight as usual, says Mark. Appreciate that. And of course, Dorset not a million miles away from you. Let's speak to Stuart in London, who has some thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number he's called. Stuart, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thank you very much. I just say about Linda, she's so immaculately turned out, isn't she?
She's got very good opinions too.
The Labour, two Labour MPs could learn a few lessons.
I think you're right.
They look like they buy their clothes from Oxfam, half of them. But anyway, let's get back to the point. Our armed forces is in a terrible state. If you look at it, if we had come to a war with Israel or even Iran, we wouldn't be able to beat them.
I don't think we're going to be at war with Israel, but yeah, I know what you mean. If there were in any sort of war with...
Say, as for instance, the size of the country. We've got no armed force. All our submarines aren't working. We've got no ships. Our armed forces we've got 70,000, and apparently half of them aren't fit to fight. Half of them don't like cold countries, hot countries. We are in that diabolical state, especially the world as it is today. And they started with the Conservatives, and this lot have just enforced it, running it down and down and down and down. And these people resigned. They did the right thing by resigning. It showed how they got a bit of integrity. Well, a lot of ministers in Labour, I hope you're listening, none of you have got any integrity whatsoever.
Well, there's a heck of a lot of them resigning as well. You've got this Parliamentary Private Secretary, you've got the Defence Secretary, you've got the Armed Forces Minister, the Health Secretary resigned a couple of weeks ago. We've had all these different people resigning at different times when it comes to Starmer. How can he continue? Should he continue, Stuart?
Well, no, he should be gone. And Rachel Reeves should be gone as well. And they keep saying we haven't got any money. Well, if you look at the money they spent, this net zero nonsense, how many billions is that costing us? We've got millions of people not working that should be working. They're doing nothing to get these people back working. Do you know the best thing to get these people back working? If you're on benefits, you've got to work for them. Monday, Tuesday, you avail yourself at the job centre, looking for work. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you work for your benefits from 8 in the morning till 5 at night. And it gets them in the habit of getting up in the morning, going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I agree with you. The dignity of work. And Stuart, it's interesting you mentioned that, actually, because back in the day, Franklin Roosevelt, when he was trying to get people back to work after the Depression in America, he employed people to hold balloons in Times Square to scare away pigeons. The point was it's better to get up and go to work in the morning if you can, if that's possible, if you're not stopped for doing so by a disability, well, and getting into that habit and doing it. And the welfare bill is completely out of control in this country, Stuart.
Well, if you look at that right now, I had Crohn's disease. I got it from 13.
I'm really sorry to hear that. That's a horrible condition.
At 21, I went down to 6 stone 11. I had a major surgery. I was in hospital for weeks. I was still working up to 2 weeks before I went in. Mm-hmm. And they said to me at the hospital, said, how the hell did you even stand up to stay at your stomach? How did you stand up, let alone work? And I was back to work within 3 months afterwards.
Well, good for you, my goodness. Stuart, thanks for your call. Really appreciate that. There's a lot of really good opinions coming into this station, and we'll get as many calls, texts, tweets and voice notes on the air in the next hour, right up until 10 o'clock. Mark Francois, the Shadow Defence Minister, joins us next. And I actually, believe it or not, wanted him a bit earlier in the programme, but it suited his diary to do 9 o'clock, and thank goodness that coincidence occurred. He is going to give us his view on the absolute shambles at the Ministry of Defence and in government too. I want your views too in the next hour here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. The Armed Forces Minister, Al Carnes, has resigned an excoriating letter against the Prime Minister, following one from Pamela Nash, who's the Parliamentary Private Secretary. She followed the resignation of the Defence Secretary. So three figures, three Labour MPs at the Ministry of Defence, all gone because of this defence funding programme. We'll speak to the Shadow Defence Minister, Mark Francois, in just a second, get his verdict. I want your verdict too. 0344 499 1000. Where is Keir Starmer politically in all of this? His ministers keep resigning. We had the Health Secretary a couple of weeks ago. Could Al Carnes be standing for leadership? Wes Streeting, I think he probably will anyway. John Healey, well, did he do it out of principle? Lots to talk about in all of this. And interestingly, in Al Carnes' resignation letter, he spoke specifically about the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill as well. That's something I know Mark Francois really cares about too. Loads to discuss on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note. Send me a WhatsApp text message. Give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock on the crisis in defence and indeed for the Prime Minister. Stay with us here on Talk. Mark Francois is the Shadow Defence Minister. Mark, I expect you've read all these letters. I mean, when you have the Armed Forces Minister saying the machinery of government has been left to decay, a serving minister cannot ask fellow veterans to trust a process. He no longer trusts himself. We ask soldiers to fight for this country. In return, we owe them the kit to do the job and the loyalty to stand by them when it's done. We're failing them on both. It has become clear to me that the change I had pushed for is not going to come. He says, I've sat in rooms, seen the assessments, Al Carnes says, and spoken to the commanders who will be asked to do more with less. I cannot in good conscience stand at the dispatch box and defend a level of investment I know to be inadequate to the task. A serious country funds its defence to meet the threat it actually faces, not the threat it wishes it faced. Do you disagree with any single word of that, Mark?
No, I mean, I'm glad you've read it out, but it saves me reading it out. But what is happening is the Ministry of Defence, a department I was honoured to serve in as a minister for 3 years, albeit a decade ago. Now, Al Carnes is my opposite number. I'm his parliamentary shadow. The department is disintegrating before our eyes. So the Secretary of State has resigned. The Minister for the Armed Forces, who is traditionally the number 2 in the department, has resigned. The Parliamentary Private Secretary at the department has resigned, the ministerial aide. So the department is falling apart. And I've always respected John Healey. I've debated against him many times. But I've always said he was an honourable man. And he's clearly shown that. He's put the welfare of our armed forces above his job in cabinet. And whilst Al Carnes and I have from time to time crossed swords, we've been both debating what's called the Armed Forces Bill for 3 months now on opposite sides for our two parties. I've always respected Al. They don't give you the Military Cross, the Distinguished Service Order for nothing. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he has felt he has to go as well, he's followed his boss out the door, and we may come on to this, but we have been very, very against the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill.
We'll definitely talk about that in a minute, Mark. We'll definitely talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, the fact he said that that bill is not fit for purpose, which we've been saying in Parliament for a year, I think we are vindicated by that. So it's sad to see this department falling apart before our eyes, but the first duty of government above all others is the defence of the realm. And the department responsible for that very serious duty is falling to pieces tonight on Keir Starmer's watch.
The former Defence Secretary Sir Ben Wallace, said, "I warned John Healey about the Treasury's defence tricks. He didn't listen." The former Defence Secretary is a decent man, but he allowed himself to be constrained by Rachel Reeves. It takes a special type of arrogance, according to Sir Ben Wallace, who was Defence Secretary under the Conservatives. It takes a special type of arrogance to ignore warnings from past and present intelligent leaders, military leaders and defence secretaries. But Rachel Reeves and the Treasury, he says, possess it in spades. What do you make of that, Mark?
I think that's right. I think that Rachel Reeves as Chancellor, I don't wish to be overly personal, but she has no history of any affinity for the armed forces. She doesn't really understand the armed forces. She's never served in the MOD. I think she just looks at the numbers on the spreadsheet, and defending this country in an increasingly dangerous world with the war in Ukraine, with tension and perhaps even tonight renewed military conflict in the Middle East.
It's just been, sorry to interrupt you, Mark, but it's just been announced that Dan Jarvis, who I believe is the Security Minister in the Home Office, that's off the top of my head, has been appointed the new Defence Secretary. He's a former military man himself. I wonder what you make of that appointment.
Well, Dan Jarvis is a former paratrooper. He served in Afghanistan. He wrote a very good book, which I have, called The Long Way Home. I respect Dan Jarvis. I respect his service. But I think now the department needs an absolute champion, someone who's prepared to be fearless relative to the Treasury for the reasons that you were just giving. I think time will tell whether or not Dan Jarvis is that person.
And the first question I would ask Dan Jarvis, I was interviewing him tonight, was, is John Healey wrong, or is Keir Starmer wrong? Is Al Cairns wrong, or is Keir Starmer wrong? Is Pamela Nash wrong, or is Keir Starmer wrong? Because those three people who've left the Ministry of Defence today are all saying what you're saying, Mark. They're saying there isn't enough funding for defence, we're not protecting the country, and the Prime Minister, in his reply to John Healey, says it's all fine.
And why is his Defence Secretary and his Armed Forces Minister just quit?
Exactly.
Look. For quickly, I know the nature of the beast is we're always tight for time of interviews, but if I may, here is the context. When Labour produced the Strategic Defence Review on the 2nd of June last year, the lead author, remember, was Lord Robertson, a man who joined the Labour Party in 1961, a former Defence Secretary himself, and former Secretary General of NATO. Unimpeachable credential. That's why they asked him to do it. He and his co-authors, Dr. Fiona Hill and General Sir Richard Barrons, were all adamant when they published the review a year ago. You needed to spend 3% of GDP on defence in order to deliver what was in the SDR. They were absolutely in lockstep on, right? Mm-hmm. What Healey says in his resignation letter today is that the best that the Treasury were going to offer was we would get to 2.68% of GDP by 2030, so 4 years from now. So what that means in pub English is that this Prime Minister and this Chancellor were never going to find the money in order to be able to fund the Strategic Defence Review, which was a review led by a former Labour Defence Secretary. That, in the end, is why Healey and Cairns have gone, and they're right. What Starmer and Reeves have been doing is to deceive, and I use the word deliberate, to deceive the British public that they were going to fund the biggest increase in defence spending since the Cold War. That's not true, because in a year, the Ministry of Defence at Treasury behest is cutting operational revenue spending by £3.5 billion. So Starmer and Reeves have not been honest, and in effect, Healey and Cairns simply couldn't put up with it anymore, and they resigned. They put the armed forces before their own careers, and I respect what both men have done.
I want to talk about the Northern Ireland aspect of this in just a second, but let me just tell our viewers and listeners a little bit more about Dan Jarvis. He is a former paratrooper, as Mark Francois has been saying there. He's been the Security Minister in the Home Office since the election in 2024. He's also been a Minister of State in the Cabinet Office since last year. He's the MP for Barnsley North and has been an MP for the last 15 years. He also served in Iraq. He was deployed to Northern Ireland too, and that is where my next question is. And I just want to read a little bit more from Al Carnes's astonishing letter to the Prime Minister when he resigned, and asked for Mark Francois, the Shadow Defence Minister's view on it. The same instinct that serious problems can be managed rather than faced, writes Al Carnes, the Armed Forces Minister has just resigned, runs through the Northern Ireland Legacy Bill. I have worked to fix the bill from the inside, but it remains unfit for purpose. It risks failing the very veterans it claims to protect, says Al Carnes. Men and women I served with, those I buried friends alongside, people who did their duty under conditions most individuals in Westminster will never have to imagine. I set out the changes I believe were necessary and the lines which I could not in good conscience go beyond. Those lines have not been accepted. I have run out of room to argue this case honourably from inside government. A serving minister cannot ask fellow veterans to trust a process he no longer trusts himself. So despite the fact that Al Carnes was arguing the government's case, Mark Francois, and arguing against you, this, we now know, is what he really believed.
I agree with every single word you just read out live on national television. We always knew Carnes didn't really believe in that bill. The words unfit for purpose are damning. He missed some of the key votes on that legislation because he couldn't bring himself to vote for it. He's now gone the whole hog and resigned. Everything we have been arguing, if you'll forgive me for saying this, for the last year against that bill in defence of our veterans has just been vindicated by the words that you've read out.
I mean, all you now need to know, Mark, all you now need to do when you're facing Dan Jarvis or whoever becomes the new Armed Forces Minister is read that out in Parliament and ask that new holder of that office, why is Al Carnes DSO, Military Cross, former Armed Forces Minister, why is he wrong?
Well, thank you, Peter. That had occurred to me, but you may yet see your prediction come true.
Yes.
But I'm hoping we won't have to do that. I'm hoping that now this Prime Minister, whose premiership is clearly coming to an end. I mean, he's had, what, 6, 7 ministers resign now. It's clearly fine, mate. Everyone in the Commons knows it. Everyone in the media knows it. I'm hoping that before he goes, he can do the decent thing and withdraw that bill, because what is most important is not that we've been vindicated, though we have. It's not that Al Carnes has done the right thing in the end, though he has. It's for the veterans who have been. They are the ones who've been arguing for years about this process, and they have been proved right, and it's even more important that they've been proved right than the politicians have proved right, if I may say so.
Keir Starmer, as you say, seems to be coming to the end. We've got that by-election in Makerfield next week. I read out the candidates earlier on in the programme. I just wonder whether you think this is inevitable, that Andy Burnham, if he wins that by-election, and it is an if, becomes Prime Minister, or what happens? I'm sure you, of course, will face any Labour leader, but when it comes to what could be the case in the direction of the country, what's your instinct?
I've been a Member of Parliament for 25 years last week.
Congratulations.
So, thank you very much. So I'm talking of anniversaries. It's my 4th wedding anniversary tonight, so I've broken away.
I really appreciate you coming on your wedding anniversary to do our programme.
No, so I've just got to say thank you to Olivia for letting me do that. But
and we do too. Thank you, Olivia.
Bless you. So look, in that quarter of a century in the House of Commons, I've learned few things in politics are absolutely inevitable. You deal all the time in a balance of probabilities. This week, it's more likely that X will happen than Y, and maybe a month later, it's more likely that Y will happen the next week. You see this all the time in the media. If Andy Burnham, and I hope people will vote for Mike Winstanley, the Conservative candidate, for the record, because he's an old mate of mine. But if Burnham were to win, it's not axiomatic who will become Prime Minister. It's not absolute. Others may enter the lists. Starmer may fight. It's not a given. I've read Andy Burnham's book, Head North, that he wrote in 2024 with Steve Rotherham, the Metro Mayor for the Greater Liverpool City region. Interestingly, I read it last year, because you never know. And on defence and foreign policy, he's a blank sheet of paper. He's very hardly ever shown any interest in defence or foreign policy. He's got very few things on the record. So we don't really know where his heart lies on all of that. We do know he wants to rejoin the European Union. We do know he's pro-PR, and the British people rejected that in a referendum in 2011. But on defence and foreign policy, thus far, he's an unknown quantity. But I would very much hope that if he did become Prime Minister, one of his first decisions would be to drop that rancid Troubles bill if Starmer hadn't dropped it already.
Mark, thank you for joining us this evening, especially on your 4th wedding anniversary. Thank you to Mark Francois and indeed Olivia Francois for their help this evening. For Shadow Defence Minister Mark Francois MP joining us there. What do you think of what he said? 0344 499 1000. Anthony is on the line from Manchester. Anthony, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, how are you doing?
Hi there.
Just talking about the defence stuff and everything that's going on at the moment. So I'm taking from experience, really, to be honest with you. I'm a former soldier. I served in the Royal Artillery. I served nearly 15 years. My father also served for 10 years. And my son is an elite soldier in 2-9 Commando Regiment, Royal Artillery. And he proudly, a couple of months ago, showed me around his camp and showed me around the equipment that they're working on. Now, I also know that that equipment was the same equipment that was in the Falklands War in 1982.
Wow. I mean, that's 44 years ago.
Yeah, precisely. It was also the same equipment that saved my life when I was in Bosnia, because it fired up on the hills when I was stuck in the middle of a conflict in Sarajevo. But this is equipment that is basically outdated. Imagine the metal fatigue on some of that equipment. Yeah?
Yeah.
If you want to take this into realistic theory, you take the Falklands War in 82, and you hadn't updated the equipment, we would have been sending the lads to fight in the Falklands War with Spitfires, Hurricanes, and 25
That's a really good point, Anthony. And the fact is that, as Al Carnes points out, the nature of war, the nature of the threat, the nature of what people like your son need to do has changed dramatically in that time. It's changed dramatically in the last 5 years, never mind the past 50 years.
Well, it's changed dramatically from when I served in the 90s.
Yes.
You know, I served in the Cold War. I served, obviously, I mean, I'm a Gulf War veteran from 91. I served in Ireland. I served 2 tours of Bosnia. You know, but the threat has changed. You know, my dad served in the 70s, you know, and the threat has changed dramatically from then, but we're still using the same equipment.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because the lads are sat there with the same light guns that we used back then. Yeah. So it's massive.
I mean, Anthony, you're clearly very, very proud of your family's history, your own contribution, and your son and what he is doing right now, and you absolutely should be very proud of that, and I want to thank you for your service and your family's service to this country. When you think of your son maybe being called up to go somewhere or on a tour somewhere and he doesn't have the right equipment, it must be very worrying for you, especially when these politicians, the Prime Minister said, nothing to see here, they have enough money for the equipment they need.
Well, they haven't, clearly, because I know that half the equipment in his camp be sat there rusting to death.
Yeah.
Because he's shown me the equipment, you know, over the years. He's shown me the equipment that it's just falling apart. And as I say, but as I just said, it'd be like sending the lads to the Falklands War with the equipment from 1944. Yeah. You know, you can't do that in a modern warfare. You know, when I went to Bosnia, I know that some of the equipment we had was probably, at the time, it had been updated and it was the most modern equipment we could fight with. You know, but then I'm asking my son to fight in 2026 with the same equipment.
Same stuff. Anthony, fascinating to talk to you, and thank you very, very much for sharing your story with us. Really interesting to hear that, and all the very, very best to your son as well. Leslie's been in touch and says Starmer needs to resign, and in doing so apologise to the country for his failures in immigration and defence and putting citizens at risk. He is just the most out-of-touch Prime Minister we have ever had, says Leslie. David says when successes government of the establishment fail to take the defence of the realm seriously and wish to prioritise benefits claimants and illegals above British nationals, then the inevitable will happen. Sir Keir is gone. What follows in society is something else. Claire in Worcestershire says listening to all this evening has left me feeling rather scared for our future and the future that my sons will enter into. I'm also so very sick and tired of hearing lie after lie from our government. Are they so stupid to think that we can't see all through this chaos? And legitimately, we the nation are furious at this government and its arrogance, says Claire. They have time to push their party agenda, and they push it over the needs of our country and the wants of the tax-paying people. How dare Keir Starmer treat us with this much contempt and disrespect? Every day there's something else. We are in a state of anarchy, says Claire. Mark says if Starmer were to go now, the people of Makerfield would no longer feel compelled to vote for Burnham just to get rid of the Prime Minister. Keith in Nottingham says, so the ministers in charge of the defence of this country have done the honourable thing and resigned due to not being able to deliver what they want. Does this mean the rest of the Labour front bench will resign? Because they are also failing, says Keith in Nottingham. Well, thank you for that. On Dan Jarvis, he has been appointed the new Defence Secretary, former military man himself, paratrooper. Dan Jarvis is okay, says Mark, but to take that job is a little short-sighted, isn't it? Surely the time has gone to get Starmer out. And another person, Mark, has been in touch from Yorkshire. He says, is everyone listening tonight called Mark? They're not. There are some others as well. Caroline in Norfolk, for example, who says, I love talk and I love your show, but like one of your callers just said, I'm lying awake at night scared stiff about the state of this country. If something doesn't happen very, very soon, I don't see how or where this all ends. It's absolutely terrifying, says Caroline. Caroline, I'm so sorry to hear that you're feeling that in Norfolk. Please let's make sense of it together, and let's have a discussion about what's going on, because we can let off a bit of steam together. We can talk about this. We can see what's happening to the country, why it's happening, and work it all out together. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Varlic Halakane was a 32-year-old black man. He murdered 3 white people. Not once in any part of the conversation or reporting was there any racial profiling or even the question raised.
I don't want to drag this boy onto the issues, not onto Henry, and that is something that the family have asked for.
35 years I've been doing this. I've never seen a moment when most of mainstream media and most of mainstream politics was more out of touch with the country than over this issue. Quite extraordinary.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Let's hear a few voice notes now. Firstly, from Peter.
Well, Healy resigning. You know what, right? The rats are leaving the sinking ship, aren't they? Because even they know now, right, that this government is doomed. Starmer needs to resign. He needs to call a general election because lies, lies and misleads, lies and lies and lies. That's all we get, isn't it? He's unreliable, Prime Minister. We've never had it, the country so bad. And I think that unless Keir Starmer resigns and calls a general election, all this violence and all these riots are going to continue, and I think they're going to continue and get worse. The government is not fit for purpose.
Thank you for that. I've just been looking through some tweets as well during the break, and also whilst listening to Peter's message, excellent message as well. Elle says, we are literally defenceless. Les says, Dan Jarvis, new Defence Secretary, he must be mad. Ray says, the doctor who says processing centres in France is, in my humble opinion, a bit dumb. The migrants who fail to get asylum will get straight in a dinghy. Dennis says, we urgently need an election. This Labour government that is sabotaging our country must be removed. Another person says, it took the Conservatives 14 years to get to this stage. Starmer's Labour government managed this chaos in 2, and no matter who leads them, it will never get any better. Socialist ideology is the problem, not the personalities. Ali says, Graham Stringer, who was the Labour MP earlier this evening, our first guest this evening, who said that Rachel Reeves should resign. Ali says, Stringer working hard on Burnham's behalf to get rid of Reeves so that Burnham could put in a chancellor anointed by him should he become leader of the Labour Party. You're just wrong on that, Ali. I mean, I asked Graham Stringer a few weeks ago whether he would be campaigning for Andy Burnham. He said he would not in the Makerfield by-election. Let's hear another voice note, this time from Tristan.
It doesn't make any difference with John Healey going at all. The government is on a self-sabotage mission to basically do nothing about our defence and our military. For years, it's basically been pushed to the side, left, right and centre. But now it's like, it's pretty paramount that we do actually do something. But when you keep hating on the people that would actually want to be in the military and calling them far right racists and everything else, it doesn't really matter who takes control of the military, because it's just seen as something that's not important. Other things like their virtue signalling with net zero is more important.
Tristan, thanks for your thoughts on that. Let's speak to Mike from Oxford. Mike, I understand you're a new caller to the station. I'm delighted you've picked up the phone this evening. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi Peter. I don't think they actually want a strong military. Keir Starmer, Ed Miliband, they're part of the Fabian Society, and the kind of ideology of the Fabian Society was always to destroy the nation state and bring in global socialism. So, we've got Lord Hermer who's prosecuting ex-servicemen, even though some of those claims he knew were false.
OK, we just need to be really careful, Mike. I don't want to libel or in any way defame Lord Hermer, who is, hold on a second, Mike, who is a very well-respected lawyer in his field. I don't like his politics, but I think we just need to be really careful about that. I'm sure he would absolutely reject what you just said there, Mike, but please do continue if you've other thoughts.
I apologise to Lord Hermer then.
No problem.
But also giving up the Chagos Islands, our strategic base. I mean, it doesn't matter what they say. We need to pay attention to what they're doing, and they seem to be hollowing out and stripping out the armed forces. Potentially, maybe they want us to have a closer tie with Europe.
Will Dan Jarvis make any difference, do you think, Mike?
What was that, sorry?
Will Dan Jarvis make any difference now he's Defence Secretary?
I mean, hopefully, but it depends what they can get out of the Treasury, really, and Rachel Reeves. And the point's been very well made that, they won't cut spending in other areas for ideological reasons and probably political reasons as well. They're looking at their political base, which isn't the working class anymore. It's not really Labour. It's Labour in name only, isn't it?
Mike, thanks for your thoughts there. Mike in Oxford, appreciate that. And just to be absolutely clear, there's no suggestion that Lord Hermer has done anything wrong, of course, and he is a very eminent and well-respected lawyer. I think he's probably less well-respected as a politician, but certainly what Mike said, and Mike did apologise there as well, and I do too, and I'm sure Lord Hermer would reject the insinuation from Mike there. Happy to clear that up. Let's hear another voice note from Rob this time.
You know what? It doesn't matter who becomes Defence Secretary because they're all useless. There's not one of them that's competent in that Labour Party. So it doesn't matter. And as for Healy himself, I respect the fact he had the backbone to resign. Good on him. However, as a Defence Secretary, you only had to watch him in interviews to see he was also useless and not up to the job too.
Was he useless? I'm not sure. I wonder what you think about that. We're going to talk in just a second to Kevin Schofield, the political editor of HuffPost UK. But before that, I want to talk about circumcision. Grace is in London and is on the line. Grace, what do you think?
Well, it's not a topic I've given a ton of thought to in that I don't have a particular body part myself. But
I'd sort of assumed that, Grace. I mean, I'd never really thought about it before, but of course you never assume anything in this game.
I suppose. But no, I mean, it does actually come up for me from time to time in the sense that it's mentioned in the Bible a lot. It's mentioned in a passage I was reading yesterday, and in the Old Testament, God instigates it as a way for people to show that they're committed. But then in the New Testament, it said that actually people should decide for themselves if they want to commit to God, and that they can do this by turning repentantly to Jesus. And then you have quite a bit of the New Testament with Paul saying, you need to stop telling people, he's saying this to some of the new Christians, he's saying you need to stop telling people that circumcision is necessary because it's no longer necessary.
But the point is as well, it's not just for religious reasons, and whether it's necessary or not necessary, people do see it as part of their faith. Certainly many Jewish people do, vast majority of Jewish people. Also in America, I mean, most men are circumcised anyway because that's just what they do, and there are loads of medical reasons to get circumcisions too. So
I gathered that from an episode of Friends.
yes, I remember that episode of Friends and the addition of some pastry. Grace, I just wonder as well whether this is just another barmy thing that the Green Party has come up with. I mean, they want to legalise all drugs, for example.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the reasons I'm furious with the Labour Party is that amongst the aid programmes they have axed, because I know that some aid money is not spent well, but some of it really has been. Some of it has been spent on trying to tackle what is sometimes called female circumcision around the world, but is actually better called female genital mutilation. So the Labour Party axed a programme to tackle that, and I'd really rather see the Green Party focus on reinstigating things like programs to stop that happening, and also things to help the environment, and various policies that are maybe more important. And I think ultimately I wouldn't support circumcision because I think it doesn't sound particularly nice, and I think that ultimately kids really should get to decide about their own beliefs in relation to God as they grow up. But I also think that because it's so culturally embedded, it's not something that people should be spending time arguing about.
This is not a big issue, Grace. But listen, thank you for your thoughts on that. Thank you to James in London, who says the Greens are happy to let trans people chop off their whole penis, but not happy for religious people to chop off a part of a penis. Thank you for that, James. This really put it into sharp relief, and clearly this is an issue that matters to you. Leslie says Rachel Reeves may have a degree in economics, but that doesn't make her an economist. Starmer must go and take Reeves with him. Another person says there's no exaggeration to say the Conservatives will not have significant representation at Westminster after the next election. And another person says, just an observation, you're interviewing Conservative MPs as the official opposition, yet Reform UK is consistently outpolling every other political party in Britain. The losses suffered by both Labour and the Conservatives at the event, local election almost all to Reform, surely merits treating Reform spokesman on equal terms. At least we invited a Reform MP on. That person initially agreed and then pulled out. We hope to speak to that person perhaps tomorrow or on another occasion. We're very happy to interview Reform this morning. Jeremy Kyle, I'm fairly sure, spoke to Nigel Farage this morning and to Leila Cunningham. So listen, they're very, very welcome in their view and entitled and happy to come on this station. I'll interview politicians from any party who want to come on this station. Zach Balansky wants to come on. I'll happily interview him. No problem with that, but thank you for that, Mark. When people don't appear on TV stations, it's rarely because we haven't asked them, and I think that's always worth remembering. There are loads of people we ask of the I don't know how many guests have been on the programme tonight, maybe 7 or 8. I mean, we might have asked twice, 3 times that number of people to come on the programme. There are all sorts of logistical things. Mark Francois, for example, had his anniversary dinner 4 years after his wedding. So, I mean, he came off that to talk to us. I'm very grateful to him and indeed his wife, Olivia, for agreeing to that. So, yeah, we do try to get all sorts of people on all the time. We don't always get them. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, but it's rarely through lack of asking. Lots to discuss. Donald Trump as well says signing a deal with Iran maybe over the weekend. We've heard a lot from him on what could happen with Iran. We'll bring it back to the UK as well, not just on the many resignations, 3 resignations from the Ministry of Defence, but also this story about NHS patients waiting in corridors and indeed cupboards. Kevin Schofield will be with us in just a second. He's political editor of HuffPost UK. Stay with us here on Talk and get your call in to let me know before 10 o'clock what you think. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Andre and Ash will be here at 10 o'clock, but in the intervening 22 minutes, there is plenty to discuss. We'll get your calls, text, tweets and voice notes on the air between now and then. I also want to talk to Kevin Schofield, the political editor of HuffPost UK. Kevin, what a day. Flippin' heck.
Yet again, Peter, it's always busy, but some days are busier than others, as you know. And yeah, I kind of thought today might have been a little bit quieter,
bit less busy now for John Healey, Pamela Nash and Al Carnes. Have you ever seen anything like Al Carnes' resignation letter? Like, it's sort of ramped up, hasn't it? You got one from Healey thinking, right, cold anger. Then you had Pamela Nash saying, you know, our country is more divided now than it ever has been in my lifetime. The delays and difficulties with securing the necessary funding to progress the Defence Investment Plan has been the latest issue that is damaging the public trust in us, which is probably about an 8 out of 10. And then you've flipping, you know, Al Carnes and his letter and the excoriating things he said in that. Have you ever seen anything like it?
No, I haven't actually, and I mean, it's hugely significant. And I know we've been talking about Keir Starmer being in the last chance saloon for quite some time, but I really think it is now last orders. I think he is toast. It's only a matter of time. Now, I don't think there's any way back. You know, the first duty of any Prime Minister, as we hear so often, is the safety and security of the country. And when you've got the Defence Secretary and the Junior Minister basically saying to the Prime Minister, you are failing to keep the country safe, then I just don't see how there's any way back from that.
So what happens now? I mean, Dan Jarvis, another military man appointed Defence Secretary. Surely the first question from any journalist, certainly the first question I would ask, is why are Pamela Nash, Al Carnes and John Healey wrong?
Yep, exactly. I mean, Dan Jarvis has got the poison chalice. Yeah, I mean, he's the first thing to say about Dan Jarvis is he's hugely respected.
Yeah.
MP on both sides. You know, he's not really a partisan politician. He's got a tremendous military record as well, former parachute regiment, and you know, as I say, hugely respected. But you're right, the number one question is, how can you defend the defence investment plan? Are you going to go in there and look for more money? Because the thing is, it's not just John Healey and Al Cairns saying we need more money. This is the army chiefs. This is what they have been told by our top brass, that what the government is offering is nowhere near enough. It's not even half what they need. They say is the bare minimum that the defence industry, the Defence Department requires. Now, I'm not sure what assurances Dan Jarvis has had before taking up the post, but certainly reading what Keir Starmer has said this evening, he seems to be insisting that, what is in the Defence Investment Plan is enough. And, clearly, as far as John Healey and Al Cairns and the Army Chiefs are concerned, it's nowhere near enough. So I don't know what Dan Jarvis's answer is going to be to that very obvious question.
Who's responsible for this mess, do you think? Because you've got so many people telling you, not just simply because, look, everybody wants more money. Everybody in government wants more money all the time. There are very few people, unless you're sort of Jacob Rees-Mogg or Michael Gove or someone like that, who sort of welcomes austerity and says, yes, we should do less and government should be smaller. Certainly if you're a Labour politician, it's unlikely that you're going to say you want less money. But from Dan Jarvis's perspective, he will be in a situation, as will Keir Starmer, where, as you say, all of these people, the entire sort of defence establishment has been saying, and three politicians who until today have worked for the Ministry of Defence are saying this will not do. Huge pressure on Keir Starmer and perhaps Rachel Reeves too?
Definitely Rachel Reeves. I mean, I thought that was probably the most significant part of John Healey's resignation letter. It was not just that he was criticising the Prime Minister, but he was basically laying the blame at the door of the Treasury and of a living Downing Street, saying that both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were unwilling and unable to come up with the money that the armed forces require. So, I mean, serious questions for...
And let me just read from this letter. To be honest, I nearly mixed up my letters. There are three excoriating letters sitting on my desk and I wasn't sure which one was which, but this is definitely John Healey, the now resigned Defence Secretary. The new era for defence required further investment through the Defence Investment Plan. The excellent and extensive cross-government work that completed in January, overseen by you, me and the Chancellor, confirmed the scale of the challenge and the rising demands on defence. Since then, you have been unable, and the Treasury has been unwilling, to commit the resources that the nation needs to defend the country at this time of rising threats. I mean, that is pretty significant, isn't it? You can't really say it more plainly than that.
No, it's absolutely damning. And yet, I think it was really significant when he talked about the Treasury being unwilling. Clearly, he sees the Treasury as the roadblock here, that he's not letting Starmer off the hook, far from it. He's basically saying that you've not been able, Prime Minister, to persuade your Chancellor to loosen the purse strings and give us the money that we need. And again, this is a serious challenge to Rachel Reeves. Now, there was suggestions last week that as and when Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister, should he win this by-election next week, he will keep Rachel Reeves in place. I find that very difficult to believe. I found it hard to believe.
I can't see it. Surely they're just so inextricably linked in all of this. It's interesting we're talking about the Defence Secretary resigning and the Armed Forces Minister and their sort of ministerial aide sidekick, Pamela Nash. There's also a really damning report today about thousands of patients a day in corridors and cupboards, 3,000 of them, because no beds are available in overcrowded A&E units. Data also showing that overall hospital waiting lists have risen for the first time in 6 months. 7.22 million people, up from 7.11 million in March, are on an NHS waiting list. The Health Secretary, the new Health Secretary, James Murray, who replaced Wes Streeting last month, said corridor care is unacceptable, undignified and there's no place in our NHS. That is why, for the first time, we are publishing this data to shine a spotlight on where the problems are greatest and ensure trusts get the support they need, with the vast majority of corridor care concentrated in a small number of organisations. I mean, that's just another huge problem for the government in an NHS that's got record funding and has got record funding for basically the last 15 or 16 years.
Yep, exactly. I mean, it was largely protected from austerity, wasn't it? David Cameron made that a central plank of his own premiership. I think Wes Streeting's probably glad that he's got out when he did, really, so he can avoid these negative headlines. Unfortunately James Murray says it has no place that corridor care has no place in NHS. Well, clearly this report shows that, unfortunately, it does.
It does. I hate this phrase. It annoys me as much as stepped back when someone's resigned. I've stepped back from the job. Yes, it has no place. They often say this about, racism has no place in our society. Anti-Semitism has no place in our society. I mean, I wish it had no place in our society, but it's there.
Absolutely, it's unavoidable, and you can't wish it away. So, James Murray can use all the warm words that he likes, but until they get to grips with it, and the thing is as well, the NHS was one of the few areas I think where the Labour government had a good story to tell thus far. Waiting lists have come down, but this shows the size of the task. And I suppose the only silver lining for James Murray is that he probably won't be Health Secretary for much longer either, because we're probably going to have a new Prime Minister sooner rather than later.
OK, Kevin, thank you very much. That's Kevin Schofield there, he's political editor of HuffPost UK. I appreciate you joining us this evening. And Trump this evening as well is saying that he may well sign a deal with Iran perhaps over the weekend. There's lots to report this evening. There's lots to react to. And whatever you want to say, do get in touch between now and the end of the programme. There's 13 minutes left and plenty of calls we will take. 0344 499 1000. Just a reminder that we have some exciting news to share with you from our friends at talkSPORT, our sister station. With the World Cup kicking off today, talkSPORT and Meantime have teamed up to create a new lager. It's called So Good Lager, which will be poured from all O'Neill's pubs and also some of the best sports pubs right across the UK. You can find your nearest pub by visiting talksport.com/sogood. 18 plus, please drink responsibly. A couple of messages before the break. Paul says having 3 ministers resign, is that not a declaration of no confidence? Jay says only a third or perhaps half of Reeves's PPE degree would have been in economics, says Jay in Tonbridge. PPE, Politics, Philosophy and Economics, which I think was the degree that Rachel Reeves did. Leslie says if Russia decides to attack us, and seeing as we have no defence capability, would Starmer have the cheek to ask Trump to help us? Lots more to discuss between now and 10 when Andre and Ash take over. We'll have a short break first, but if you want to use that break to pick up the phone, you can certainly do so. 0344 499 1000.
Varlic Alakane was a 32-year-old black man. He murdered 3 white people. Not once in any part of the conversation or reporting was there any racial profiling or even the question raised.
I don't want to drag this boy onto the issues, not onto Henry, and that is something that the family have asked for.
35 years I've been doing this. I've never seen a moment when most of mainstream media and most of mainstream politics was more out of touch with the country than over this issue. Quite extraordinary.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Rachel Reeves did indeed study politics, philosophy and economics at New College at the University of Oxford. After completing her degree, she went on to earn a master's degree in economics from the London School of Economics and subsequently worked as an economist at the Bank of England. Yeah, we know the last thing did happen, but for less time than she originally told us. Right then, let's speak to Dave in Essex, who has given me a call on 0344 499 1000. Dave, thanks for picking up the phone. What would you like to say?
Oh, thanks for taking my call. I'd like to say, who is the enemy? I mean, some of us are old enough to realise that when the Soviet Union fell in the 90s, instead of embracing the Russians as a liberated people that was just as glad to get rid of the Soviet Union and Stalinism as what we were, instead of that, the Americans decided that they were going to treat the Russians as a defeated nation and thought that they could walk in, Bill Clinton and Yeltsin, and balkanise Russia and literally take Russia for everything. And Putin came along and said, no, hang on a minute, you've got the Monroe Doctrine to say that no one can put any kind of offensive weapons in your hemisphere, and I'm going to say the same thing about Ukraine. You know, it was the expansion of NATO that drove Putin over the edge. And if you look at all the things, I mean, Angela Merkel herself, and this is on the record, it's not me making this up, because I wouldn't. I've got too much respect for you, Peter. But Angela Merkel herself said the Minsk agreements were nothing more than a holding pattern, so the Ukrainians could rearm, regroup, and everything else like that. When there was an agreement, when there was an actually agreement just ready to sign, who went over there and scuppered it? Our good old boy Boris Johnson. So, I mean, when Putin first came along, he just wants to do business with the West. He wanted to join NATO, but was rebuffed. And I just think to myself, you know, I know a lot.
Perhaps about missed opportunities there, but I mean, you know, Putin is an evil dictator, and he has killed so many innocent people in Ukraine as well. We were talking a few days ago about how this all seems to have really stalled, doesn't it? Zelensky saying that he wants to sit down with Putin, and that appears to have been rebuffed.
Oh, but I mean, Mr. Zelensky, I mean, he's not even a legitimate kind of leader. He should.
He was democratically elected.
Sorry?
He was democratically elected, Dave.
Yes, but that democratic election has run out, and he never put himself up for another election.
We didn't have elections during the war, the Second World War, for example.
Yeah, but I mean, Peter, we're nitpicking over things.
But how do you have a war? How do you have an election in Ukraine when they're at war?
Well, we had elections during the Second World War. I mean, this is just a semantic argument that doesn't hold water, I'm afraid, Peter. Right. And I've got a lot of respect for you, Peter, I must say. And I spoke to you when I came out of hospital, and you was very kind to me. And I'd like to just let you know that I'm making a very good...
I'm delighted to hear that, Dave. That's really good news.
No, really. And I'd just like to say... They've let our armed forces go down the pan because they know there's no real threat. Putin doesn't want it. He doesn't want to rule Ukraine, and he certainly
does want to rule Ukraine, Dave. Surely, why would he invade if he didn't want to rule Ukraine?
I'm afraid he doesn't. All he wants is the Donbass and the people that he's
taken a fifth of Ukraine territory, Dave, and he's attacked Kyiv.
They had a vote. He put it to the people, and he said, what do you want to do? Do you want to go with the West, or do you want to stay Russian? And they overwhelmingly voted to keep Russian in the...
I don't know if we can say if that's democratic or if that was properly done.
I mean,
okay, Dave, listen... Okay, Dave, listen, thanks for your points. I really appreciate them this evening, and I wish you well in your recovery as well. That's Dave in Essex there, so thank you to him for his call. A final call from Jamie in Wales. Jamie, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, it was just about Keir Starmer.
Okay, yeah.
Aligned with the EU. He's going to the EU, I believe, on Tuesday.
I think you're right, yeah.
And I think we should be looking at, he possibly could be going there to sign something with the EU as regards an EU army.
We don't know that, though, Jamie. I mean, that's not something...
Oh, absolutely we don't know that.
But are you worried we may well move in that direction?
That's just my opinion. I think we should be watching him, as well as all these resignations.
Yeah.
I mean, if he does that and he's lied to his party and kept it under his hat, I think it's absolutely despicable.
Well, we'll certainly see what happens anyway, Jamie. And don't you worry, we'll keep a close eye on him and exactly what the Prime Minister does and says in the next 24, 48 hours. And indeed, for as long as he's Prime Minister, will be a very interesting thing to keep looking at. And of course, we'll follow that at all times. Ash is here. Hello, sir.
It's all right. Sorry, I'm a bit hot because I've been watching Mexico, South Africa.
You mean you haven't been listening to this programme, is what you've been saying?
I've been listening to this programme whilst watching it and imagining you're doing the commentary.
I'd be
and
great.
I'm thinking, why is he doing such bad commentary? Talking about politics in the middle of this match.
What is the score for the match?
2-0 to Mexico. South Africa have had a man sent off.
Right.
I'll put some money on it. It's a mugs game. If the fun stops, get some more money and try and buy some... No, don't. And so I've lost that. That's down the drain. But I like the outside chances, you know, the 100 to 1s, the 400 to 1. So when they were 1-0 down with 10 men, I put money on them.
You bet on Scotland?
Yeah, well, you know, you got to bet on... It's always only a 2-horse race, isn't it? Only a 2-horse race.
That's it. What's coming up in the show, Ash?
We're talking about the pastor resurrected after prayer. We're going to talk to Pastor Chris Wickland. He was resurrected after prayer, so it's a miracle. We're also talking about... You're from Belfast, aren't you?
About 30 miles away, but yeah, I know
So
Belfast
what's going on, man? It's terrible. Have you spoke to your relatives out there?
Everybody's okay. I have one relative who is reasonably close to some of the stuff that's happening, although thankfully not affected by it. He was out walking his dog last night and saw some of the stuff that was going on, sent me some pictures and things.
It's terrifying, isn't it, with the history and everything, and they know what they're doing. You know, it's a very dangerous situation. We're going to be talking to Pete Barnes. He's coming in to give his views on everything that's going on. John Healy, of course, resigning. You've obviously got people in on the inside. What have you heard?
Well,
is it all collapsing down? Is it El Alamein? Is it the beginning of the end?
I've actually been in touch with someone quite senior at the MOD today who just has been reflecting the chaos, I think, of what's happening. We've got 3 of them gone now, and now Dan Jarvis is the new Defence Secretary.